One girl asked a millionaire single father if she could have coffee with him. His answer changed everything forever, a story that will touch your heart. Subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment where you are watching from. The heat of January turned Los Angeles into an urban pressure cooker. By 9 in the morning, the thermometer already read 89 degrees, and the humidity clung to the skin like a second layer of clothing. Emily wiped the sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand as she parked her white Honda Civic in front of the imposing gate of the mansion in Beverly Hills. That address had been etched in her memory since childhood, when she accompanied her mother on weekends and was enchanted by the fragrant gardens that seemed like a piece of paradise amidst the concrete jungle. She was 28 years old, with wavy brown hair tied in a practical bun, honey-colored eyes that observed everything with almost analytical attention, and an upright posture that concealed years of insecurity. Her simple yet well-tailored navy blue dress was a carefully chosen armor, professional enough not to appear careless, discreet enough not to draw attention. "Good morning, Mr. James," greeted the doorman, who had known her since she was a girl. The grey-haired man opened the gate with a warm smile. "Emily, what a pleasant surprise. Mrs. Sarah is in the kitchen. You can go in." Emily crossed the front garden, her flat shoes sinking slightly into the precisely trimmed grass. The scent of jasmine lingered in the air, mixed with the sweet perfume of spring flowers that insisted on blooming even in the scorching summer. The three-story mansion loomed before her, all in shades of beige and white, with large glass windows reflecting the clear, blue sky. It was the kind of construction that screamed old money in every architectural detail. She was there to pick up some documents from her mother, nothing more. But as she rounded the side of the house toward the kitchen entrance, her gaze caught a solitary figure on the side porch, the one that overlooked the backyard garden. David Anderson was sitting in one of the white wicker chairs, leaning forward with his elbows resting on his knees. He held a coffee cup with both hands, as if that object were the only solid thing in a crumbling world. Emily recognized him immediately, although it had been years since she had seen him up close. The 42-year-old businessman was tall, probably around 6'1", with broad shoulders that perfectly filled his rolled-up white dress shirt. His black hair had silver strands at the temples, and his chiseled jaw was covered by a few days' stubble. Even from afar, Emily could see the deep, dark circles that marred his face. She hesitated. It wasn't her place to interrupt. It never had been, but something in his body language made her stop, an instinct she couldn't explain. David looked like a man drowning on solid ground. Emily diverted her path, her feet deciding before her mind could protest. She climbed the 3 low steps leading to the porch, the wooden boards creaking softly under her weight. David abruptly lifted his head, as if waking from a nightmare. "Sorry, I didn't mean to startle you," Emily said quickly, raising her hands in a placating gesture. "I just was passing by and—" She fell silent, realizing how her words sounded inappropriate. What was she doing? He was David Anderson, owner of one of the largest construction companies in the country, a man whose fortune was measured in billions. And she was the daughter of his housekeeper, but then their eyes met, and what she saw there completely disarmed her. There was no arrogance she expected, nor the polite distance that marked all the interactions she had witnessed between him and the staff over the years. There was only exhaustion, a fatigue so profound that it seemed to corrode his soul. "Can I have coffee with you?" The words slipped out before Emily could reprimand herself, soft but direct. She was surprised by her own boldness. David blinked as if processing a question in a foreign language. The silence stretched for 3-4 seconds. Emily felt the heat rise up her neck, tinting her cheeks. What an absurd presumption! He probably thought she was being intrusive, even presumptuous. She was already turning to leave, murmuring an apology, when his voice reached her. Please." The word came out hoarse, laden with an emotion that David clearly didn't intend to reveal. He cleared his throat, straightening up in the chair. "I was needing company. Not an assistant, not corporate advice, just—" He paused, his grey-blue eyes fixed on her with an unsettling intensity. "Just company." And then he smiled. It wasn't a social smile, the kind rich men automatically distribute. It was small, fragile, genuine. The wrinkles around his eyes deepened, and Emily noticed he had a subtle dimple on the left side of his face. Somehow, that broken smile was the most beautiful thing she had seen in months. "Please, have a seat," David gestured to the chair next to his. "The cup is clean, I promise, and the coffee is good. Your mother made it before she left." Emily sat down slowly, aware of every movement. The wicker chair creaked slightly. David stood, up with the natural grace of someone used to commanding boardrooms, and went to the coffee cart on the side of the porch. There was a French press, still with hot coffee, some white porcelain cups with golden edges, sugar, and a plate of croissants that exuded an irresistible aroma. "With sugar?" he asked, already pouring the steaming coffee into the cup. "No, thank you." "Just like me." David returned and extended the... Emily lifted the cup. Her fingers brushed against his during the transfer, a fleeting contact that sent an unexpected electric jolt down her spine. She pretended not to notice, bringing the cup to her lips. The coffee was perfect, strong, aromatic, with that balanced bitterness that only a well-made Brazilian coffee could achieve. The scent mingled with the perfume of the jasmine in the garden, and Emily closed her eyes for a moment, letting the combination of sensations envelop her. "My mum always says that bad coffee is a sin," she commented, breaking the silence that threatened to become uncomfortable. David let out a short laugh, almost a sigh. "Mrs. Sarah is right. She's wise in many things." He took a long sip of his own coffee, his eyes lost in the garden ahead. "I haven't slept well in weeks. I think I'm living on caffeine and stubbornness." The vulnerability of that confession caught Emily off guard. Men like David Anderson didn't admit weaknesses, not to strangers. But perhaps that was exactly it, she thought. To him, she was a safe stranger, someone without judgments, without expectations, without corporate or social agendas. "What's keeping you up at night?" Emily found herself asking, the architect in her always curious about what lay behind the facades people built. David hesitated, his fingers drumming on the side of the cup. For a moment, Emily thought she had gone too far, crossed an invisible line, but then he spoke, the words coming out slowly, as if each one required deliberate effort. "My son, Noah." The name came out soaked in tenderness and fear. "He's 7 years old and wakes up crying every night because his mother decided that Paris was more important than he is, and I don't know how to fix this. I don't know how to make a 7-year-old understand that he hasn't been abandoned, even when that's exactly what happened." Emily felt her heart tighten. She knew Noah by sight, having seen the boy grow during sporadic visits to his mother over the years. A boy with dark hair and big eyes, always polite, but too quiet for a child. "And my ex-mother-in-law calls every day to tell me I should hire a full-time nanny. That a single man can't raise a child properly, that I'm being selfish trying to do this alone while running a company." David ran a hand over his face, exhaustion evident in every line of his expression. "Board meeting at 8 in the morning, school presentation at 10, lunch with investors at noon, pick up Noah at 5, dinner, homework, bath, bedtime story, and then the cycle starts again. And I'm failing on all fronts." "You're present," Emily said, her voice firm yet gentle. "That's already more than many children have." David looked at her then, really looked at her, as if he were seeing her for the first time. His eyes traveled over her face, not with the evaluative gaze Emily was used to receiving from men, but with something different. Curiosity, perhaps gratitude. "You're Emily, aren't you? Mrs. Sarah's daughter." It wasn't a question. "I remember you from the weekends years ago. You'd be reading in the garden while your mom worked, always with a different book." Emily felt the blood rush to her face again. She hadn't imagined he had noticed her existence back then. "Books were my best friends," she admitted. "More reliable than people." Wise. David took another sip of coffee. "And what do you do now? Are you still friends with books?" "I'm an architect. I work at Anderson and Seeks's in West Hollywood." Architect. David repeated the word as if savoring it. "That suits you. You always observed everything with that attentive gaze, as if you were mentally redesigning the world around you." Emily couldn't help but smile. "That's pretty much it. I see spaces and imagine how they could be better, how people could move through them more intuitively, how natural light could transform environments." "It must be frustrating then," David commented, leaning back in his chair, "to see so much potential wasted on poorly executed projects." "Every day," Emily agreed, warming to the topic. "Los Angeles is full of buildings that prioritize profit over functionality, density over quality of life. It's as if we've forgotten that architecture isn't just about erecting structures, but about creating spaces where human life can flourish." David was watching her with increasing intensity, and Emily realized she was talking too much, exposing herself too much. She had this habit when she got excited about architecture, forgetting to filter her thoughts. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I tend to get carried away with the subject." "Don't apologize." David leaned forward, his elbows back on his knees, but this time there was energy in his posture, not exhaustion. "It's refreshing to hear someone speak passionately about their work. In most of my meetings, people talk about profit margins and timelines. No one talks about making human life flourish." They fell into silence for a moment, a different silence now. Not uncomfortable, but full of unspoken possibilities. Emily could hear the distant song of a mockingbird in the garden, the whisper of palm leaves moving in the occasional breeze that offered minimal relief from the heat. "My company needs to redesign our corporate space," David suddenly said, his eyes fixed on her. "The building is outdated. Employees complain that the spaces don't work, that there are flow issues, lighting problems, acoustics. Do you have a portfolio?" Emily's heart raced. An opportunity like this was exactly the kind of project that could elevate her career, put her on the radar of important clients. But caution immediately set in. She was the daughter of his housekeeper. People would talk. They would say she got the project through family connections, not merit. "I do," she replied carefully. "But, are you sure you want to hire the firm where I work? I mean, people can what?" James interrupted her, a hint of hardness entering his voice. "Can they think I gave you the project for other reasons? Emily, I build skyscrapers. My reputation is built on solid foundations, literally. I don't hire architects for favors or charity. I hire for competence. If your work is good, and I strongly suspect it is, then you will earn this project on your own merit." Emily took a deep breath, feeling something expand within her chest. It was rare, so rare for someone to see beyond her circumstances, to see her as a professional first. "So, yes," she said, her voice steady, "I would love to present a portfolio to you. When would be convenient?" James smiled again, and this time the smile reached his eyes. "Completely. How about next week? I'll officially send the project details to your office, let the partners make the initial presentation, and then you can show me your specific vision." Emily nodded, trying to contain the excitement that threatened to overflow. This was the kind of opportunity she had waited for years, and it was falling into her lap on a January morning in an unplanned conversation over coffee and insomnia. "Thank you," she said sincerely, "for the opportunity and for the company." James raised his cup in a silent toast. "Thank you for doing something no one else has done in months, for seeing a tired man and simply asking if you could have coffee with him. No agenda, no judgments, just humanity." Emily felt unexpected tears prick at her eyes and blinked quickly to ward them off. She stood up, smoothing her dress. "I should go. My mother will think I got lost." "Emily." James also stood up, and standing she noticed how tall he was, how his presence filled the space. "I'm serious about the project, but more importantly, I'm serious about this here." He gestured vaguely between them. "About this conversation. It was important to me, more than you can imagine." "It was important to me, too," Emily admitted, and it was true. Something had changed on that jasmine-scented balcony under the scorching January sun. She didn't know what it was yet, but she could feel the weight of change, like the atmospheric pressure before a storm. She descended the steps of the balcony and was almost at the kitchen entrance when she heard his voice one last time. "Emily?" She turned around. "I hope we can have coffee together again, soon." Emily smiled, a genuine smile that lit up her entire face. "I hope so, too, James." And as she entered the kitchen, where her mother waited with a curious and knowing look, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that her life had just turned a page. Where this new story would take her, she didn't know. But for the first time in a long time, she was eager to find out. Carnival exploded through the streets of Los Angeles with an intensity that transformed the city. Street parties took over entire avenues, samba echoed from every corner, and a wave of glitter and contagious joy swept even into the most upscale neighborhoods. But inside the mansion in Beverly Hills, on that Tuesday in February, a heavy silence reigned, laden with worry. Emily was in the middle of a meeting at the office when her cell phone vibrated for the 5th consecutive time. It was almost noon, and she was presenting adjustments to the project for Anderson Construction to the partners when she saw her mother's name flashing insistently on the screen. Sarah never called during work hours unless it was urgent. "Excuse me," Emily murmured to the 3 men around the conference table, quickly stepping out into the hallway. Her heart was already racing when she answered, "Mom, what happened?" "Emily, thank God you answered." Sarah's voice sounded tense, muffled. "Look, I'm in the countryside taking care of Aunt Madeline. She got worse after that fall. I can't come back right now, but Mr. James just called me in a panic. Noah has a very high fever, and the entire household staff is off due to Carnival. He can't leave the boy alone because he has an emergency board meeting that he can't cancel and—" "Mom, breathe," Emily interrupted, leaning against the cold wall of the hallway. On the other side of the glass door, she could see Roger Anderson, the senior partner, gesturing impatiently. "What do you need?" "I suggested he call you. I know it's a lot to ask, daughter, but you're off tomorrow for the holiday and you've always been good with kids. Remember how you took care of Mrs. Johnson's children when we lived in Westwood?" Emily closed her eyes. It was an impossible situation. Accepting meant further blurring the lines between professional and personal. Refusing meant leaving a sick child without proper care. There was no real choice. "Okay, I'll go. Give me his number." 20 minutes later, Emily was in the office garage elevator when her phone rang. A number she had already saved, though she wouldn't admit it to anyone, not even to herself. "Hello? Emily?" James's voice sounded different on the phone, deeper, laden with urgency. "Did your mother talk to you? I know it's absurd to ask this, that you have your own life, your work, but I'm desperate." "I know," my mom explained. Emily unlocked her car, tossing her bag onto the passenger seat. "I'm leaving the office now. I'll arrive in about 40 minutes, depending on traffic. the sigh of relief on the other. End of the line was audible. "Thank you. Seriously, Emily, I don't know how to thank you. I'll leave instructions with James for you to get in. The house keys are in—" "I know where the spare keys are," Emily gently interrupted, starting the engine. "I grew up going to that house, remember?" "Of course, sorry, I'm not thinking straight." A pause. "Noah is in his room, second floor, third door on the left. I gave him some fever reducer. 2 hours passed, but the fever didn't subside. The pediatrician said that if it goes above 101.5 degrees Fahrenheit, it's time to take him to the hospital." "Understood. Go to your meeting, David. I'll take care of him." Emily hung up before he could protest or thank her again, and plunged into the chaotic traffic of the city. The route to Beverly Hills, usually calm, was clogged with revelers and street parties. Samba music spilled from the cars around her. People danced on the sidewalks in colorful costumes, and the smell of beer and street food wafted through the open windows. It was a surreal contrast to the mission that brought her there. When she finally arrived at the mansion, it was almost 2 in the afternoon. The February heat was even more intense than January's, the relentless sun reflecting off the asphalt in visible waves. James greeted her with obvious relief on his wrinkled face. "Thank goodness you came, Emily. The boy is very sick. David left half an hour ago, all disheveled. I've never seen the man so nervous." Emily grabbed the keys, crossed the front garden, and entered through the main door. It was the first time she had used that entrance. She had always come in through the kitchen. The foyer was majestic with double height. Ceilings, a crystal chandelier that must have cost more than her car, and a marble staircase elegantly curving to the second floor. But Emily had no time to appreciate the architecture. She climbed the stairs 2 at a time, her soft sneakers silent on the polished marble. The hallway on the second floor was wide, with cream-colored walls and abstract paintings that were likely originals by expensive artists. Third door on the left. Emily knocked softly. "Noah, it's Emily, your Grandma Sarah's friend. Can I come in?" A low groan was the only response. Emily slowly opened the door. The room was large but cozy, with light blue walls and shelves filled with books and neatly organized toys. A wide window let in light filtered through linen curtains. In the center, a twin bed where a small figure was curled up under a comforter, despite the heat. Emily approached, sitting on the edge of the bed. Noah was smaller than she remembered, more fragile. His black hair was plastered to his sweaty forehead, his face flushed with fever. His eyes, when they opened, were the same bluish-grey as his father's, but huge on his childlike face. "Hey, champ," Emily said, softly placing her hand on his forehead. It was burning. "You're not feeling well, are you?" "My head hurts," Noah whispered, his voice weak. "And my tummy, too." Emily picked up the digital thermometer from the bedside table, already knowing what she would find. 102.1 degrees Fahrenheit, dangerously close to the limit David had mentioned. "All right, we're going to take care of you," she said, with a calm she didn't feel. "First, you need to drink water, lots of water. And let's take off this comforter because you're too warm." In the following hours, Emily went into full care mode. She prepared warm compresses for Noah's forehead, convinced him to eat soup, even when he swore his stomach wouldn't accept anything, and read stories softly when he was too restless to sleep but too weak to stay awake. The fever rose and fell in waves, and each time it went above 102 degrees, Emily seriously considered calling David and taking him to the hospital. But around 7 in the evening, when the sun finally began to set, the fever started to relent. Noah slept for 2 straight hours, the first time he had rested properly all day. Emily sat on the floor next to the bed, her back against the wall, checking his temperature every 20 minutes. That's how David found her when he returned at 9:30 in the evening. She had her head tilted back against the wall, her eyes closed, but not sleeping, just exhausted. Emily. She opened her eyes immediately, straightening up. David was standing in the doorway, still in his suit, his tie loose and the first buttons of his shirt undone. There was an intensity in his gaze that she couldn't decipher. "He's better," she whispered, getting up slowly so as not to wake Noah. The fever went down to 99.5 degrees an hour ago. He had soup, drank water, and is sleeping peacefully. David entered the room, moving silently to the bed. He leaned over his son, gently touching his forehead, checking for himself. Emily saw his shoulders relax, the tension he carried finally easing. "Let's talk downstairs," he murmured, gesturing for her to follow him. They descended together, the silence between them filled with unspoken things. David led her not to the formal living room, but to the kitchen. It was a surprisingly cozy space for a mansion of that size, with light, wood cabinets, granite countertops, and a rustic dining table that could seat 8 people. Emily knew that kitchen better than any other room in the house. "Coffee?" David offered, already reaching for the coffee maker. "Please." They moved in an awkward silence as David prepared the coffee. Emily sat at the table, realizing for the first time how exhausted she was. Her back ached from sitting on the floor, and she had a throbbing headache that promised to worsen. David placed 2 steaming cups on the table and sat down in the chair across from her. The rich smell of coffee filled the space between them. "I don't know how to thank you," he began, the words coming out carefully, measured. "What you did today, going above and beyond, doesn't even cover half of it." Emily wrapped her hands around the warm cup, letting the heat comfort her. "He's a sick child who needed care. Anyone would have done the same." "No," David corrected her, his voice firmer. "Most people would have made an excuse. You left your job, crossed the city during Carnival, and spent the whole day taking care of someone else's child. How little you know. This isn't just anyone. This is exceptional." Emily felt the heat rise to her neck. She didn't know how to handle direct compliments. She always felt uncomfortable when the focus was on her. "He reminded me of when I was a child and would get sick. My mother had to work, so I would be home alone, figuring things out. I swore that if I ever could, I would be there for a child in need. That's all." James studied her face for a long moment, and Emily had the unsettling impression that he saw much more than she intended to reveal. "You're an architect, but you should have been a doctor or a teacher. You have a gift with children." "I like creating things," Emily replied with a small smile. "Whether it's projects or positive memories, it's all about building in the end." The corner of James's mouth curved. "Architecture philosophy at 9:30 at night. I like it." They sipped their coffee in comfortable silence for a few minutes. Outside, the distant sound of fireworks and carnival music echoed through the city. Inside the kitchen, it felt like there was a bubble of tranquility. "Can I ask you a question?" James broke the silence, his voice more hesitant now. "Of course." "Why architecture? What made you choose this career?" Emily considered the question, swirling her cup between her hands. "When I was a child and came here with my mother, I was fascinated by how spaces made people feel. The formal living room made people stiff, speaking softly. But the kitchen," she gestured around them, "the kitchen made people relax, smile. And I thought, who decides that? Who creates spaces that make people feel a certain way?" She shrugged. "I found out it was architects, and I wanted to be one of them. I wanted to create places where people could be themselves." James was watching her with an intensity that made Emily's heart race. "And can you create those spaces?" "I try. Not always do clients allow it. Sometimes they want designs that impress, not that function. that say, look how much money I have, not look how happy my family is here. Emily paused, realizing she might have gone too far. Sorry, Don't apologize, James interrupted her, echoing his words from that January morning on the balcony. I hired you precisely because I want someone who thinks like that. My corporate office doesn't need to impress. It needs to function. It needs to make the people who work there feel valued, not intimidated. Emily nodded, feeling that familiar excitement when talking about projects. That's exactly it. Corporate architecture should be about creating environments where creativity flourishes, where collaboration happens naturally, not where people feel oppressed by glass walls and cold minimalist furniture. Then show that to me, James leaned forward, his eyes shining with something between challenge and enthusiasm. In the design, show me what a corporate space that truly works for people looks like, not just for the financial bottom line. Are you sure you want that? It won't be the cheapest design, and it definitely won't look like the typical corporate buildings in Los Angeles. I'm absolutely sure. James extended his hand across the table. Partnership? Emily hesitated for just a second before shaking his hand. His palm was warm, rough in some places from working not just in offices, but also on construction sites. Partnership. They released their hands, but something of the warmth of that touch lingered. Emily took the last sip of her now cold coffee. I should go, she said, although a part of her didn't want to. There was something comforting about that kitchen, that conversation in James's presence that made her feel seen in a way she rarely experienced. Let me drive you, James offered, already getting up. You don't have to. I brought my car. Emily, it's almost 10 at night. You've been here all day, and you're exhausted. At least let me call a driver to take you home and bring your car later. It was tempting, but Emily shook her head. I'll be fine driving, but thank you. James sighed, clearly not satisfied, but knowing when to back off. All right, but text me when you get home, just so I know you made it safely. The request caught her off guard, so casual yet so full of care. Okay, I will. James walked her to the door, and just as she was about to leave, he lightly touched her arm. Emily? She turned, suddenly very aware of how close they were, the intensity in his grey-blue eyes, the subtle scent of his cologne mixed with the aroma of coffee. Thank you, not just for today, but for seeing Noah as a child who needed care, not as your client's son, for being genuine. Emily felt an emotion she couldn't name tighten her throat. He's a special boy, James. Anyone would see that. No, not everyone sees. His voice dropped lower, more intimate. But you did, and that means more to me than you can imagine. Emily stepped out into the warm February night, her heart racing. In the car, she needed a few minutes to compose herself before driving. What was happening? This couldn't be what it seemed. She was the daughter of his housekeeper, working on his corporate project, and had cared for his sick son. Lines were being blurred, and she knew she should be more careful. But when she got home in her small but cozy apartment in Silver Lake, she found herself smiling as she sent the promised message. I arrived safely. Noah is better. That's what matters. The reply came in seconds. Thank you for everything. Rest. You deserve it. And then, a minute later, another message. And Emily, I would love to have coffee with you again, whenever you have time. Emily stared at her phone for a long time, her thumb hovering over the keyboard. She should have said no, should have kept it professional. But instead she typed, I would love to. Let me know when. That night she fell asleep with her phone still in hand, and in her dreams there were fragrant jasmine flowers and cups of coffee shared under the Los Angeles sun. March arrived, bringing the autumn of Los Angeles, that subtle transition where mornings were still warm, but afternoons gained a cooler breeze. The trees in Beverly Hills began to turn golden at the tips, and there was something in the air that seemed to promise change. Emily was in the conference room of Anderson and Seeks's, surrounded by boards with her architectural sketches, detailed models, and carefully selected material samples. It was 3 in the afternoon on a Thursday, and she had spent the last 6 weeks immersed in the project for Anderson Construction, working late into the night, refining every detail, every angle, every choice. The smell of fresh paint from the models, mixed with the eucalyptus aroma of the plants she had included in the presentation, creating an atmosphere she hoped would convey the essence of her concept, corporate spaces that breathed, that lived. Impressive. David's voice made her look up. He was standing in the doorway, his eyes scanning the boards with genuine attention. He wore a charcoal grey suit that accentuated his eyes, and there was something different about him since that night in February, a lightness that hadn't been there before. "You brought the forest into the office." Emily felt the familiar warmth rise to her neck, but smiled. In the past few weeks, they had met 4 times to discuss the project. Always professional, always with the door open, always with an assistant nearby. But there were moments, glances that lingered, a second longer, smiles that meant more than they should, a subtle tension in the air that neither dared to name. "Biophilia is essential for productivity," Emily explained, gesturing to the main model. "Studies show that the presence of natural elements in work environments reduces stress, increases creativity, and improves overall well-being. So I brought in vertical gardens, water features, maximize natural light through strategic skylights, and cross-ventilation that reduces reliance on air conditioning." "And the costs?" The question came from Roger Anderson, who had quietly entered behind David. The senior partner was 53, with slicked-back grey hair, gold-framed glasses, and a smile that never reached his eyes. Emily always felt he watched her with a mix of suspicion and something that made her uncomfortable. "Initially higher," Emily admitted, keeping her voice steady. "But the return on investment happens in 18 months through energy savings, reduced absenteeism, and increased productivity. I have all the numbers here." She slid a thick folder across the table. Roger flipped through it with a skeptical expression. "Very idealistic for the real business world, don't you think? Our clients want efficiency, not Zen gardens." "With all due respect, Roger," David interjected, his voice cutting through the air like a sharp blade. "I hired you because I wanted something different from the soulless corporate standard that dominates Los Angeles. If I wanted more of the same, I would have stuck with my previous architect." His eyes met Emily's. "Present the complete project. I want to see everything." Emily took a deep breath and began. For 40 minutes, she guided them through her vision, explaining every choice, every material, every angle designed to maximize comfort and functionality. She talked about how collaborative workspaces alternated with quiet nooks for deep concentration, how the meeting rooms had acoustics treated with sustainable wood panels, how the cafe on the terrace overlooked a suspended garden that the employees themselves could cultivate. David asked insightful questions, challenging her to explain decisions, but always with genuine curiosity, not skepticism. Roger, on the other hand, seemed to be looking for flaws in every detail. "What if it rains? Won't these vertical gardens create moisture problems?" he questioned, crossing his arms. "Multi-layer waterproofing with a smart drainage system," Emily replied promptly. "It's already specified in the structural project." "And maintenance? Who will take care of all these plants?" "Contract with a specialized company, cost already included, in the operating budget." "And what if the client doesn't like plants?" Emily looked him directly in the eye. "Then the client shouldn't have requested a space that prioritizes human well-being." but I doubt that's the case. She glanced at David. You have a 7-year-old son who loves nature. You spend 12 hours a day in the office. Don't you want to create a place where you don't feel like you're locking yourself in a concrete and glass prison? David smiled, that slightly crooked smile that made his dimple appear. Sold. When can we start? David, I think we should discuss this more calmly, Roger quickly interjected. Maybe analyze other proposals, compare costs. No need. David stood up, extending his hand to Emily. This is the project. Emily, prepare the contracts for signature by the end of the week. Emily shook his hand, professionalism preventing her from showing the joy that was exploding inside her chest. It was the biggest project of her career, the validation she had waited for years. But when David left, followed by his assistants, Roger remained. He closed the conference room door with a soft click that somehow sounded threatening. Emily? He approached, hands in, his pants pockets, his expression carefully neutral. I need to talk to you, colleague to colleague. Emily began to gather her materials, an alarm ringing in her mind. You can talk. You are a talented architect, I won't deny that. But, he paused deliberately, there are rumors in the office about your relationship with client Anderson. Emily froze, a board still in her hands. My relationship is strictly professional. Of course it is. Roger's tone was condescending, almost paternal. But you need to understand how things look. How long has it been? 15 years. And suddenly you land the biggest contract of the year. People make connections, Emily. They draw conclusions. Wrong conclusions, Emily retorted, slamming the board onto the table harder than she intended. I earned this project through competence, not family connections. I believe you, Roger said, but his eyes told a different story. But it's not just me who needs to believe. It's the rest of the market. It's the reputation of the firm. And recently, he hesitated, as if weighing his words. I've heard that you two have been meeting outside of business hours, lunches, coffees. He calls you directly, bypassing the secretary. Emily felt her blood run cold. How did he know that? She had been so careful. Their meetings about the project. I'm sure they are. Roger stepped closer, subtly invading her personal space. But here's a piece of advice, Emily. From someone who's been in this market for 30 years, men like David Anderson don't mix with people like us. They have their diversions, their hobbies, but at the end of the day, they marry and do business with their equals. And if you think it's different, that something special is happening, he shook his head slowly, you're setting yourself up for a big disappointment and possibly ruining your career in the process. My career is perfectly intact, Emily said, her voice trembling slightly with contained anger. And my personal life is none of your business. Everything that affects this firm's reputation is my business, Roger shot back, the veneer of politeness finally cracking. I'm a senior partner here, and I'm telling you, as someone who cares about your future, stay away from him personally. Keep things strictly professional, because if this blows up, and it will, I won't be the one to suffer the consequences. He left before Emily could respond, leaving her alone in the conference room with her models, her carefully arranged plans, and a tight knot in her stomach. She knew Roger was planting seeds of doubt, trying to manipulate her. But the scary part was that he wasn't completely wrong. People were indeed talking, and she was getting too close to David, allowing lines to blur, conversations to extend beyond necessity. Emily mechanically gathered her materials, the excitement of the project approval already tainted by the conversation with Roger. She was putting away the last model when her phone buzzed. It was a message from David. Noah wants to know if you can join us for dinner on Friday. He insists on showing you his science project, and I admit I would also like your company. Emily stared at the message for a long time, her thumb hovering over the keyboard. She should say no. She should set clear boundaries, keep her distance. But when she thought of Noah, that sweet boy who had clung to her with such pure trust, and David, who saw her not as the housekeeper's daughter, but as a competent professional, an interesting person, she typed, "I would love to. What time?" The response came almost immediately. 7 p.m. and Emily, congratulations on the project. You were brilliant today. Emily smiled despite everything, putting her phone away and finishing organizing her materials. She would go down that staircase when she got to it. For now, she would allow herself to enjoy this victory, this recognition. But as she left the office, she didn't see Roger on the balcony smoking a cigarette, phone in hand, a calculating expression on his face as he typed a message to a contact saved only as DAX. Friday arrived with a perfect autumn sky, that deep blue, without a single cloud. Emily changed her outfit 3 times before finally settling on dark jeans and a moss-green silk blouse that accentuated her eyes. Casual but polished, friendly but not trying to impress. She laughed at herself in the mirror. Who was she trying to fool? The mansion looked different when she arrived right at 7. There were lights in almost every window, soft music leaking through the doors, and when James opened the gate, she could hear laughter coming from inside. Children's laughter. David greeted her at the door, barefoot, wearing jeans and a button-up shirt with the sleeves rolled up. There was flour on his left forearm. "Emily, sorry about the mess. Noah insisted on making homemade pizza and, well," he gestured vaguely at himself. "It turned into a controlled disaster." "Homemade pizza sounds perfect," Emily said, surprised by how good it was to see him like this, relaxed, out of his suit, with flour on his arm and a genuine smile on his face. "Emily!" Noah came running from the hallway, practically jumping on her. He had tomato sauce on his face and was wearing a yellow, child-sized apron. "You came! I made a special pizza just for you. It has cheese, tomato and basil, just like the one you said you liked." Emily bent down to his level, her heart tightening. "You remembered that?" "Of course. You said it when you were taking care of me when I was sick. You said your favorite pizza was margarita because it was simple but perfect." David watched the interaction with an expression Emily couldn't decipher. Something between tenderness and melancholy. The evening was surprisingly easy, natural. They assembled pizzas together in the spacious kitchen, Noah demonstrating all the ingredients he had picked out. At the market with his dad that morning, David played soft jazz, and Emily found herself laughing more than she had in months as Noah told school stories, dramatizing every detail with exaggerated gestures. And then the teacher said I had to present a science project, and I thought, what would be cool? And then I remembered that you are an architect, and architects build things, so I decided to make a bridge. Noah was practically vibrating with excitement. A bridge made of popsicle sticks that can hold weight. "Impressive," Emily said genuinely. "Can I see it?" Noah dragged her to the living room after dinner, where an elaborate structure of glued popsicle sticks occupied half of the space. A coffee table. It was surprisingly well built, with solid structural principles that revealed either natural talent or a patient father who had helped with the technical parts. "The arches distribute the weight evenly," Noah explained seriously, "so it won't break. Look." He began stacking books on the bridge, one at a time, until 5 heavy volumes were balanced on the fragile structure. "Noah, this is amazing." Emily knelt beside the table, examining the joints, the symmetry. "You have a talent for this." "You think so?" His eyes sparkled. "Dad said if I'm interested, he might take me to see real construction sites, but it would be cooler if you came along because you explain things in a way I understand." Emily glanced at David, who was leaning against the door, watching them. There was something in his expression that made her heart race. "It would be an honor to join you," she said softly. At 9:30, Noah was fighting sleep, his eyelids heavy. David took him upstairs for the bedtime ritual, and Emily stayed in the living room, observing the popsicle bridge, thinking about foundations and structures and how the most fragile things could sometimes be the strongest when built correctly. David returned 15 minutes later, 2 glasses of red wine in hand. He fell asleep in the middle of telling me for the 3rd time how you're the coolest person he knows. Emily accepted the wine, her cheeks warming. He's a special boy. You're raising him very well, David. I'm trying, he sighed, sitting on the sofa next to her. Not too close, but close enough for Emily to feel his warmth, the subtle scent of his cologne. Some days I feel like I'm getting it right. Other days I wonder if I'm failing miserably. You're present. That's already 80% of the battle. David took a sip of wine, his eyes fixed on the ruby liquid in the glass. Your mother raised you alone, didn't she? Emily nodded. My dad left when I was 3. He never came back. And yet you became this incredible person. Talented, compassionate, strong. David finally looked at her, and the intensity in his eyes made the air feel thinner. Your mother must be extraordinary. She is, Emily said, her voice thickening. She worked 3 jobs to put me in a decent school, to pay for my drawing materials when she found out I liked architecture. She never made me feel like I had to limit my dreams because of where we came from. Do you still feel like you need to prove something? The question was gentle but cut deep. That you belong in spaces where others think you shouldn't be. Emily sipped her wine slowly, considering the honesty that question deserved. Every day, every meeting, every presentation, I carry that with me like a second skin, the fear that someone will look at me and see not the architect but the maid's daughter who got lucky. I don't see that, David said, and there was something fierce in his voice now. I've never seen that, and anyone who does is an idiot. Emily laughed, a small, broken sound. Your senior partner, Roger, warned me this week. He said people are talking about us, that I'm using family connections to get close to you. David tensed, his jaw tightening. He said that? He's right, you know, Emily continued, finally vocalizing the fears she had been swallowing. People are going to talk. They already are. And the longer we spend together, the more ammunition we give them. And does that matter to you? David set his glass on the coffee table, turning fully to her. What small-minded people with small lives think? It matters when it could destroy my career. Emily stood up, needing distance, space to think. You have a name, a reputation built over generations. I have only my work, my integrity. If people start to think I win projects through other means, I lose everything. David stood up too, approaching her slowly, as one would approach a frightened animal. Emily, look at me. She did, and immediately regretted it. He was too close. Close enough for her to see the small golden flecks in his grey-blue eyes, the silver thread at his right temple, the small scar above his left eyebrow. You earned this project because you're brilliant, he said, each word deliberate, because your vision was exactly what I needed. It had nothing to do with your mother or with this friendship that's growing between us. But people won't believe that. Then to hell with them. David raised his hand, hesitating for a moment before gently brushing a strand of hair from her face. The touch was so tender, so careful, that Emily felt tears prick at her eyes. I don't care what they say. I care about what's true. And the truth is that you are the most talented architect I've ever met, and you're becoming one of the most important people in my son's life, and possibly... His voice dropped lower, more hoarse. In mine, too. Emily closed her eyes, letting those words envelop her, savoring them for a moment before reality returned. David, this can't happen. Not this way. Not now. When she opened her eyes. She saw the pain reflected on his face, but also understanding. He stepped back, creating physical distance that somehow made the emotional distance hurt more. "You're right," he finally said. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have. It wasn't fair to put you in that position." "No," Emily shook her head quickly. "It's not that I don't. It's that I need to do this right. I need to prove that I deserve to be here, that I deserve this project, before anything else can, before we can—" She couldn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. David nodded, understanding what she couldn't say. "Then let's do this right," he agreed. "You're going to crush this project, silence all the skeptics, and when there's no doubt left about your talent and integrity—" He paused, a small smile touching his lips. "Then we can revisit this conversation." Emily smiled through the tears that threatened to fall. "It's a plan." "It's a plan," David echoed. Emily grabbed her bag, and David accompanied her to the door. On the threshold, she turned one last time. "Thank you for dinner. And for understanding." "Thank you," David said, "for being you. For not making this easy, but right." Emily drove home with a heavy heart, but also, strangely, light. She had made the difficult choice, the right choice. But when she parked in front of her building, she noticed a car parked across the street, occupied. And although she couldn't see the driver's face in the darkness, she had the unsettling feeling of being watched. She shook her head, dismissing the paranoia. It was just exhaustion, the emotional week finally taking its toll. But as she entered her apartment and locked the door, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change, that storms were brewing on the horizon. And somewhere in the city, Roger Anderson was saving the address of the mansion in Beverly Hills on his GPS and smiling to himself as he typed a message, "Confirmed. They are involved. Proceed as planned." The response that came was short, cold, perfect. "She will regret it." April brought intermittent rains that washed over Los Angeles, leaving the streets shining and the air heavy with that characteristic scent of wet earth and asphalt. Emily stood in the conference room on the 23rd floor of Anderson Construction, looking out the panoramic window as she waited for the board to arrive. Down below, the city stretched in all directions, a sea of concrete and glass, punctuated by green patches of parks. She adjusted her black blazer for the third time, checked that the boards were in the right order, and ensured the main model was perfectly positioned in the center of the large, dark wood table. It was 9 in the morning on a Tuesday, and she was about to present the final project to the company's board of directors. Alone. Roger had mysteriously fallen ill the night before. The other partners had unavoidable commitments. It was too obvious to be a coincidence, but Emily swallowed her anger and accepted the opportunity. If they wanted to see her fail publicly, she would prove them utterly wrong. The solid wood door opened, and Emily turned, straightening her posture. David entered first, wearing a crisp navy suit, his expression professional, but with a subtle glimmer of encouragement in his eyes when he met hers. Behind him came 6 men and 2 women, all between 45 and 60 years old, all exuding power and old money. "Good morning," Emily greeted, her voice steady despite the nerves dancing in her stomach. "Thank you for taking the time this morning." "Let's see if it's worth our time," grumbled a burly man with completely white hair, sitting heavily in one of the chairs. His nameplate identified him as Charles Thompson, the CFO. David sat at the head of the table, gesturing for Emily to begin. She took a deep breath, activated the projector, and dove into the presentation. For 40 minutes, she guided them through every aspect of the project. She spoke about sustainability, energy efficiency, employee well-being. She showcased case studies, concrete data on return on investment, comparative analyses with traditional, corporate buildings. Her voice remained steady, her hands did not tremble as she pointed out details on the boards. But she could feel the resistance emanating from some board members like a physical wall, especially from Charles and a stern-looking woman named Laura Smith, the COO. "Ms. Costa," Laura interrupted for the third time, her voice sharp as glass. "These productivity numbers look nice on paper, but they're unrealistic. Do you really expect us to believe that putting plants in offices will increase efficiency by 25%? "It's not just the plants," Emily replied patiently, though she felt the tension rising. "It's the integrated system, natural light, air quality, improved acoustics, spaces designed for different types of work. There are studies from Harvard University, Oxford, and Brazilian institutions like USP. "Studies," Charles scoffed. "Academics who have never run a real business. Ms. Costa, you're too young to understand, but business is about concrete numbers, not romantic ideas about vertical gardens." Emily felt her blood boil, but she maintained a neutral expression. "With all due respect, Mr. Thompson, I am 28 years old and have 6 years of experience in corporate architecture, and the numbers I presented are concrete, based on real data from similar implementations. Implementations in smaller companies, startups," Laura pointed out, flipping through the report with disdain. "Anderson Construction is a traditional company with a 70-year history. Our clients expect seriousness, not experimentation. Our company is also stagnating in terms of innovation," countered a younger man on the board, Mark Johnson, the development director. "Our competitors are surpassing us because they are embracing new methodologies. This project could put us at the forefront, or make us a laughingstock," Laura shot back coldly. Then her eyes fixed on Emily with a calculating intensity. "Ms. Costa, I need to ask an uncomfortable but necessary question." She paused dramatically. "How many years has your mother worked for Mr. Anderson?" The silence in the room was deafening. Emily felt as if the ground had been pulled from under her feet. She saw David stiffen in his chair, his fingers gripping the armrest until the knuckles turned white. 15 years, Emily replied, forcing her voice to remain calm. "My mother is the housekeeper at Mr. Anderson's residence." "And you don't think," Laura continued, leaning forward like a predator, does this create a conflict of interest? How can we be sure she was hired based on merit and not convenient family connections?" "Laura, that is absolutely inappropriate," David began, his voice dangerously low. "No, it's fine," Emily interrupted, surprising herself. She turned directly to Laura, staring at her without blinking. "It's a fair question, although the way it was phrased is deliberately offensive, so I will answer clearly. Yes, my mother works for Mr. Anderson. No, that did not influence my hiring. I was selected through a competitive process where my firm competed with 4 others. Mr. Anderson chose our firm based on the portfolio and proposal. And within the firm, I was assigned to lead the project by the partners, not by the client." "How convenient," Charles murmured, but loud enough for everyone to hear. Emily felt something break inside her. Not exactly anger, but a crystal-clear clarity. She had spent her entire life proving her worth, justifying her existence in spaces where people like them made her feel she didn't belong, and she was tired. "You know what's convenient?" she said, her voice rising slightly. "It's being born with a silver spoon and never having to prove you deserve to be sitting at this table. It's inheriting connections and capital and still looking at someone who built everything from scratch and questioning their competence." She swept the room with her gaze. "I graduated with honors in architecture. I worked at 3 of the most respected firms in Los Angeles. I won 2 Sustainable Design Awards before I turned 25, but you see my mother cleaning houses and assume I'm inferior, that I need favors to get opportunities." "Emily!" David tried to intervene, but she was on fire now. "No, let me finish." She turned to him. With all due respect, Mr. Anderson, but if they can't separate my work from my mother's profession, then maybe this isn't the right project for me. I'm not going to beg for validation from people who have already decided I don't deserve to be here. The silence that followed was so thick that Emily could hear the low hum of the air conditioning, the patter of rain against the windows. Then David stood up, and there was something in his posture that made everyone in the room straighten up automatically. His voice, when he spoke, was icy. "Laura, Charles, you two are off this project, effective immediately." He ignored the indignant protests. "What I just witnessed was pure and simple discrimination, and I do not tolerate that in my company." He turned to Emily, and his expression softened slightly. "Emily, you don't need to beg for validation because you already have it. From me, who is the one paying for this project. But more importantly, you should have your own validation. You are exceptional at what you do, and if half the people in this room had a tenth of your talent and work ethic, this company would be twice as successful." "David, you can't just remove us," Laura began, her face red with indignation. "I can, and I just did," he cut in. "You two will be reassigned to other projects, and I strongly suggest you review your biases before I decide that reassignment is not enough." He looked around the table. "Does anyone else have objections to the project based on anything other than the technical merit of the proposal?" Silence. Mark Johnson cleared his throat, looking uncomfortable but finally speaking. "I liked the project. I think it's exactly the kind of innovation we need. My vote is yes." One by one, the other board members agreed, some reluctantly, others with genuine enthusiasm. Laura and Charles left the room without saying anything, but Emily could feel the hatred radiating from them. When the meeting finally ended and the room emptied, Emily found herself alone with David. She was trembling, the adrenaline finally draining from her system, leaving her exhausted. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice cracking. "I lost control. I was unprofessional." "You were brave," David corrected, stepping closer but keeping a respectful distance. "You stood up against bullying and prejudice. Don't apologize for that. But I put you in an impossible position, forced you to defend me publicly, which will only fuel more rumors. Emily, look at me." She did, and there was something fierce in his eyes. "I defended you because you deserved to be defended, because what they did was wrong, and honestly, I should have cut that off earlier. I saw where the conversation was going and let it go on too long." Emily felt tears threatening and blinked furiously to push them away. She wasn't going to cry. Not here, not now. "I just wanted to prove I was good enough." "You are more than good enough," David said gently. "When are you going to believe?" That? Emily had no answer. She gathered her materials with hands that were still trembling slightly, and David didn't try to stop her or continue the conversation. He understood she needed space, time to process. "Emily," he called as she was at the door. "Thank you for not giving up, for fighting, and not just for the project, but for yourself." Emily nodded, not trusting her voice, and left. That night, Emily was on the sofa of her apartment, still in work clothes, staring blankly at the TV when the intercom buzzed. She frowned. She wasn't expecting anyone. It was almost 9 o'clock. "Hello? Emily, it's me, Noah." The child's voice sounded small through the intercom. "My dad is here with me. Can we come up?" Emily's heart raced. "Of course, come on up." 3 minutes later, she opened the door to find David with Noah by his side. The boy was holding a pizza box and had a serious expression on his face. David looked tired, his suit swapped for jeans and a casual shirt. "Noah insisted on coming," David explained. "I told him in an age-appropriate way about what happened. It happened today, about people being unfair. To you. And I got really mad, Noah declared, entering the apartment like he owned the place, because you are the coolest and smartest person I know, and anyone who doesn't see that is dumb. Emily couldn't help but laugh, even with her eyes still puffy. Thank you, Noah. That means a lot. So we brought pizza, Noah continued, placing the box on the coffee table. And we're going to eat with you and watch a funny movie, because Dad said when people get sad, they need friends and pizza. And we are your friends, right, Dad? David looked at Emily, and there was something vulnerable in his expression. If you want company, if you prefer to be alone— I would love company, Emily interrupted, her voice thickening. And pizza. Definitely pizza. They settled on the small sofa, Noah between the two adults, the TV playing an animated comedy that the boy had chosen. The pizza was hot and delicious, the melted cheese comforting. And for the first time that horrible day, Emily felt the knot in her chest begin to loosen. Emily, Noah said after a while, his mouth full of pizza. I think you're really brave. Braver than the superheroes in the comics. Emily looked at the boy, then at David, who was watching his son with transparent pride. Why do you think that? Because superheroes have superpowers, Noah explained with the impeccable logic of a 7-year-old. But you don't have superpowers and still face mean people. That's what being really brave is. Emily felt the tears finally fall, but this time they were good tears. Thank you, Noah. You're very wise for 7. I know, he said without modesty, turning his attention back to the TV. David reached out, hesitated, then gently squeezed her shoulder. A silent promise. I'm here. You're not alone. And that night, in her small but warm apartment, Emily allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she truly belonged there. Not because of connections or favors, but because she had self-worth, because she had earned her place through talent, hard work, and courage. Outside, the rain continued to fall, washing the city, and Emily imagined it was also washing away her doubts, her insecurities, preparing the ground for something new to grow. But what she didn't know was that elsewhere in the city, Laura Smith was on the phone with Roger Anderson, their voices conspiring in the dark. And in Paris, a blonde woman was looking at a photo of her ex-husband with an unknown architect, circled in red in an online gossip tabloid, and smiling a cold, calculating smile. The pieces were moving on the board, and Emily was right in the center of the game. May arrived bringing cool mornings and mild afternoons, that Los Angeles autumn that called for light jackets and hot coffee. It was a Saturday afternoon, and the kitchen of the Beverly Hills mansion was filled with the unmistakable aroma of cornbread baking. Emily was sitting at the large, rustic wooden table, watching her mother work with the efficiency of someone who had repeated those movements 1,000 times. Sarah was 52 years old but looked younger. Her brown hair, now with a few grey strands, was pulled back into a low bun. Her hands, calloused from years of work, moved gracefully as she checked the cake through the oven's glass. She wore her usual work uniform, black pants and a white blouse, but had taken off her apron to talk to her daughter. "You didn't come here just to keep me company on a Saturday," Sarah said bluntly, finally sitting across from Emily. Her brown eyes, so similar to her daughter's, were perceptive, seeing far beyond what Emily wanted to reveal. Emily spun her coffee cup between her hands. There was something comforting about that ritual. In that kitchen she had known since childhood. It was as if time hadn't passed, as if she was still that little girl doing homework while her mother worked. "I need to talk to you," Emily finally admitted. "About David." Sarah sighed, a deep sound that carried years of experience and maternal concern. "I figured we would get to this conversation eventually." She took a sip of her own coffee, choosing her words carefully. "What do you want to know? Do you think I'm making a mistake?" Emily let out the question that had been tormenting her for weeks. getting involved with him, letting Noah get attached to me, blurring all these lines that should remain clear. Sarah remained silent for a long moment, the ticking of the wall clock filling the space. When she finally spoke, her voice was gentle but firm. "You know I've worked for wealthy families for over 30 years, right, sweetheart?" She didn't wait for a response. "I've seen it all in that time. Good employers, bad employers, families that treated me like furniture, families that treated me like a person." She paused, looking at her own hands. "And in all those years, I've learned some hard truths." Emily felt a tightening in her chest, knowing what was coming but needing to hear it. "There is their world and our world," Sarah continued, her voice remaining neutral but laden with contained emotion. "And no matter how hard we work, no matter how competent, educated, intelligent we are, that line always exists. I cross that line every day when I walk through the back door of this house. You grew up seeing this." "Mom, let me finish." Sarah raised her hand. "David is a good man. I've worked for him for 15 years, and I can count on one hand the times he has been rude to me. He pays well, respects my time, asks about you. When you entered college, he gave me a bonus without me asking. When I got sick last year, he paid for my health insurance without deducting anything." She paused. "But sweetheart, being a decent employer doesn't... It's the same as being ready for the entire society to judge him for getting involved with the daughter of his housekeeper." The words were like knives, even when spoken with love. Emily felt tears prick her eyes. "And you," Sarah continued, her voice softening, "you have spent your whole life proving that you are more than Sarah's daughter. You earned a scholarship, graduated with honors, landed a job at a prestigious firm. You built all of this on your own, with your talent, your sweat." She leaned forward. "But now, if this goes wrong, and my dear, the chances of it going wrong are high, you will lose all of that, because people will say you used him, that you tried to take advantage, that you weren't that competent after all." "So you think I should pull away?" Emily said, not as a question, but as a statement. "I think," Sarah said carefully, "that you should protect yourself. This world is not kind to girls like us who dare to want more than our place." Emily wiped away a stubborn tear that escaped. "And what if I'm falling for him? What if Noah has already become important to me? What if this is my chance to be happy?" Sarah stood up, walked around the table and hugged her daughter tightly. The familiar scent of soap and lavender enveloped her, and Emily allowed herself for a moment to be just a child seeking comfort in her mother's arms. "Then you have to decide what you're willing to risk," Sarah murmured against her hair. "But sweetheart, I need to tell you something I've never told anyone." Emily pulled back, looking at her mother's face with curiosity. Sarah returned to her chair, her hands clasped on the table, her eyes distant as if she were seeing something from long ago. "When I was 23, I worked in a house in Beverly Hills, a wealthy, traditional family. The oldest son was 28, just back from studying in Europe." Sarah smiled sadly. "He was handsome, intelligent, kind, and he was interested in me. It started with conversations in the kitchen, then invitations for coffee, then... Well, you understand?" Emily was stunned. Her mother had never mentioned any relationship beyond her brief and disastrous marriage to her father. "I fell in love," Sarah admitted, her voice thick with emotion. "Completely," he said. He would talk to his parents, that he would make everything official. For 6 months it was wonderful. We met in secret, planned a future together." She paused, wiping her own eyes. "Until his mother found out." "What happened?" "She fired me on the spot, offered me money to stay quiet, to disappear from her son's life. She said I was an opportunist, that I had seduced her boy, that people like me always wanted to climb the social ladder on the backs of others." Sarah let out a bitter laugh. And him? He did nothing. He stood by while his mother destroyed me. Because in the end, when he had to choose between me and the comfort of his life, between love and societal approval, he chose the easy path. Emily felt as if she had been punched in the stomach. "Mom, I didn't know. I'm so sorry." "Don't feel sorry for me," Sarah interrupted. "I survived. I found another job, moved on, and 3 months later, I discovered I was pregnant." She looked directly at Emily. "With you." The world stopped. Emily felt the air escape from her lungs. My father was," Sarah gently corrected. "He never knew. I never told him. And when you were born, I swore I would give you a better life, that you would never have to choose between dignity and love, between career and heart." She squeezed her daughter's hands. "That's why I work so hard. That's why I endured so much, so you could have choices I never had." Emily was openly crying now, tears streaming down her face uncontrollably. So many things made sense now. Her mother's fierce determination, the endless sacrifices, the insistence that Emily study, become independent, never depend on anyone. But here's the part that's different, Sarah continued, her voice growing firmer. "You are not me. You have an education, a career, financial independence. You are not in a vulnerable position like I was. And David," she hesitated, "David is not like that man was. I see how he looks at you, how he defended you in that meeting. Yes, I heard about it." A small smile. "And I see how he is with Noah, how he's trying to be a better father, how he listens when you speak." "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying you have to decide with your eyes wide open," Sarah explained, "not with romantic illusions, but with full awareness of the risks. And if you decide to move forward, you need to be prepared to fight. Because people will judge, they will talk, they will try to belittle you. And you will need a backbone of steel to withstand it." Emily wiped her face with the back of her hand. "Do you think I have that backbone?" Sarah smiled, a genuine and proud smile. "Sweetheart, you faced a board of directors and called them privileged to their faces. You have plenty of backbone. The question is, do you want to use that strength to fight for this? Because if it's going to be half-hearted, fearful, hidden, then it's not worth it. But if you're going to fight for real, then fight with everything you've got." The oven timer beeped, and Sarah stood up to take the cake out. The aroma of corn and cinnamon filled the kitchen, sweet and comforting. She cut 2 generous slices, placed them on a delicate porcelain dish, the one that was only used for the Anderson family, Emily noted with a pang in her heart, and served. "Come," Sarah ordered with that maternal tone that brooked no refusal. "Chocolate cake cures a lot of things. It doesn't cure everything, but it helps." They ate in silence for a few minutes, the sugar and moist texture of the cake truly bringing some comfort. "Mom," Emily finally said, "do you regret it? Not fighting, not telling him about me?" Sarah considered the question carefully. "I regret believing he would fight for me, but I don't regret protecting you from his rejection. Because in the end, sweetheart, you were the best thing that came out of that whole situation. And I'd rather live knowing I protected you than living with the what-ifs." "I want to fight for this," Emily heard herself say, the words escaping before she could censor them. "For David, for Noah, but more importantly, for myself. To prove that I can have this, that I deserve this." "Then fight," Sarah said simply, "but fight smart. Finish this project first. Prove your worth in such an undeniable way that no one can say you got there by other means. And then, when your position is solid, when you have concrete proof of your talent, then you can allow yourself to follow your heart." It was wise, Emily recognized, and painful, because it meant more months of keeping distance, more moments denying feelings, more nights imagining what-ifs. But it was the right path. "You're so much stronger than I am," Emily said, genuine admiration in her voice. "No," Sarah corrected. "I survived. You're living. There's a huge difference." She stood up, starting to gather the dishes. "Now go. I know you have work. And Emily?" "Yes?" "When you decide you're ready, when you decide to fight, I'll be here. Always. No matter what happens, you always have. A place to come back to." Emily hugged her mother tightly, inhaling that familiar scent, feeling the strength and love that had always been there, supporting her even when she didn't realize it. She was leaving the kitchen when she almost collided with someone in the hallway. David. He was coming back from his office on the second floor, wearing jeans and a casual long-sleeve shirt. His hair was slightly tousled, as if he had run his hands through it repeatedly, and there were papers in his hands. "Emily." He looked genuinely surprised to see her. "I didn't know you were here." "I came to visit my mom," she explained, aware of how red her cheeks were, how her eyes were still puffy. If David noticed, he had the kindness not to comment. "How are you?" he asked, the concern in his voice palpable. "After that meeting, I tried calling a few times, but I know. I'm sorry for not answering. I needed time to process everything." Emily looked at her own feet. "And to think about us, about what's happening here." David went very quiet. When Emily finally gathered the courage to look up, there was something vulnerable in his eyes. "Did you come to any conclusions?" he asked, his voice low. "I did." Emily took a deep breath. "I need to finish this project. I need to prove to myself more than anyone else that I deserve to be there, that it wasn't a favor, it wasn't a connection, but pure competence." She paused. "And that means I need to keep my distance. Not because I want to, but because I need to." David closed his eyes for a moment, and Emily saw the pain cross his face before he hid it. When he opened them again, there was understanding there, but also something deeper. "I understand," he finally said, "and I respect that. But Emily," he took a step closer, not invading her space, but closing the distance enough for her to feel his warmth. "I want you to know that when you're ready, when you've proven what you need to prove, I'll be here, waiting. Because what I feel for you isn't something that's just going to disappear." Emily felt her heart race, tears threatening to return. "What if it takes a long time? What if it takes months?" "Then it takes months," David replied. Simply, "Emily, I'm 42. I know how to recognize when something is real, and this," he gestured vaguely between them, "is real, so I can wait. Noah can wait, because in the end, when you come out on the other side, when you're sure of your worth, I want to be there to celebrate with you." "How are you so understanding?" Emily whispered. "Because I've already made the mistake of not fighting for what matters," David admitted. "With my marriage, with my ex-wife. I let work consume everything. I let the distance grow until it was too late to fix. I won't make the same mistake with you, so if you need time, space, distance to do what you need to do, I'll give that to you. Because I want that when we're together, it's without doubts, without resentments, without what-ifs." Emily couldn't hold back. She stepped forward and hugged him, quickly but intensely. David wrapped her in his arms for a precious moment, and she felt his solidity, his warmth, the silent promise that he would truly be there. Then she pulled away, wiped her eyes, and smiled through the tears. "Thank you. For understanding. For being you." "Just promise me one thing," David asked. "What?" "Don't disappear completely. Noah will miss you, and I will too." "I promise," Emily agreed. "I'll still be here, still working on the project. I just need to keep some emotional distance until everything is resolved." David nodded, understanding what she wasn't saying. "Then let's do this the right way." Emily went down the stairs, crossed the fragrant garden, and got into her car with her heart simultaneously heavy and light, heavy from the temporary separation, light from the clarity of purpose. She had a project to finish, a reputation to build, a future to conquer. And for the first time in her life, she didn't. Emily was doing this alone. She had her mother in the background, David waiting on the horizon, and more importantly, she had herself, strong, capable, deserving. But what Emily didn't see as she drove away was the figure watching from the third-floor window, or the phone being picked up, a photo being taken of that embrace in the hallway, or the message being sent with the photo attached. "I got evidence. They are clearly involved. Proceed with the next step." The response came quickly. "Perfect. It's time to bring the final touch. She will know her place." And in a luxury apartment with a view of the Empire State Building in New York, Isabella Johnson, ex-wife, former model, and mother who abandoned her child, was looking at the same photo on her phone and smiling. A cold, calculated smile from someone who was about to make her move. The game was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. June brought the peak of the Los Angeles summer, with chilly mornings and nights that called for thick blankets. The city was preparing for summer festivals, and there was something in the air that seemed to carry both promise and danger. Emily was at her desk at Anderson & Smith, surrounded by construction plans, technical specifications, and material samples when her cell phone vibrated. It was almost 7 in the evening on a Wednesday, and the office was practically empty. Only a few lights still on in the upper floors of the building across broke the darkness settling over the city. She picked up the phone distractedly, expecting it to be some work message. Instead, it was a notification from a society news website she didn't even know she had installed. The headline made her freeze. "Exclusive. Billionaire widower David Anderson in forbidden romance with maid's daughter. Sources reveal scandalous affair." With trembling hands, Emily clicked on the article. There were photos of her and David on the mansion's balcony in January, her leaving his house at night in February, the recent embrace in the hallway. All taken from angles suggesting intimacy, secrecy, something illicit. The text was worse. Close family sources reveal that businessman David Anderson, 42, widowed since the controversial separation from Isabella Johnson, is allegedly involved in a controversial romance with Emily Taylor, 28, a recently hired architect for the company's million-dollar project. The scandalous detail. Emily's mother has worked as a housekeeper at the Anderson mansion for 15 years. According to informants, the relationship reportedly began secretly months ago, raising questions about nepotism and abuse of position. Emily felt nausea rise in her throat. She continued reading, horrified, as the article outlined every meeting, every encounter, painting everything in sordid colors. There were even quotes from anonymous sources within the company, suggesting that she had been hired not on merit, but for personal favors. Her phone began to ring immediately. "David," she answered with cold hands. "Emily, did you see?" His voice was tense, controlled, but clearly furious. "I just saw. David, how did this happen? Where did those photos come from?" "Someone is watching us," he said bitterly. "Someone with access to the house, to the places we've been. Emily, I will find out who did this, and I will—" "It doesn't matter who did it," Emily interrupted him, her voice coming out louder than she intended. "The damage is done. Did you see the comments? People are—" She couldn't finish, because she had seen the comments, hundreds of them, each more cruel than the last, calling her an opportunist, a gold digger, comparing her to soap opera characters who seduced wealthy bosses, saying she had used her body to secure contracts, that her mother had probably helped in the scheme. "Emily, breathe," David instructed, and she realized she was hyperventilating. "I will sue that site. I will demand a retraction. This is pure defamation." "Suing will make it worse," Emily practically shouted. "It will keep the story alive. It will generate more attention. David, my career is over. Over. No one will hire me. After this, they will always think that I—" She choked on a sob. "Come here," David said firmly. "Now. I don't want you to be alone." "Are you crazy? Going to your house now would just add fuel to the fire." Emily stood up, starting to throw her belongings into her bag with frantic movements. I need to think. I need to talk to my mother." "Emily, please don't make any rash decisions." She hung up, unable to continue the conversation. Her hands were shaking so much she could barely grab her car keys. She needed to get out of there, needed to go home, needed to think. But when she reached the parking lot, there were 3 news vans waiting. Flashes exploded in her face, cameras advanced, microphones were shoved in her direction. "Miss Taylor, is it true that you are having an affair with your client? How does it feel to be called a gold digger? Did your mother know about the relationship? Was she the one who helped you seduce the boss?" Emily pushed through the crowd, shielding her face with her arm. She managed to get into her car and lock the doors, but the reporters surrounded the vehicle. She started the engine with her hands shaking violently and sped off, dispersing the crowd. In the rearview mirror, she saw the cars starting to follow her. With her heart racing, Emily took 3 random turns, entering smaller streets until she finally lost her pursuers. She parked on a dark residential street, turned off the engine, and finally allowed the sobs to come. She cried until there were no more tears, until her throat was raw, until she was so exhausted she could barely keep her eyes open. Then, with trembling fingers, she called her mother. Sarah answered on the second ring. "Emily, honey, where are you? I saw the news. Mom!" Emily's voice came out broken, childlike. "Mom, I messed everything up." "Where are you?" Sarah repeated, her voice firm now, maternal. "Tell me where you are and I will come get you." Emily gave the address through her sobs. 20 minutes later, a rideshare service pulled up beside her car. Sarah got out, paid the driver, and slid into the passenger seat of the Honda Civic. Emily. Without saying a word, she embraced her daughter, and Emily, who had spent weeks being strong, being professional, being brave, finally allowed herself to completely crumble in her mother's arms. "I messed everything up," she repeated between sobs. "You were right. I should have kept my distance. I should—" "Shh," Sarah silenced her, stroking her hair. "It's not your fault. None of this is your fault. But people are going to think what they've always thought," Sarah said with a hardness born from experience. "That girls like us don't deserve good things. That when we achieve something, it must be because we did something wrong to get it. This isn't new, Emily. It's just the first time you're being publicly attacked for it." Emily pulled away, wiping her face with her hands. "What do I do now?" Sarah considered the question carefully. "First, you're coming to my house, not to your apartment. There are probably reporters there. You're going to take a hot shower, eat something, and sleep. And tomorrow, with a clear head, we'll decide the next steps." "And the office? And the project?" "The office and the project will still be there tomorrow," Sarah said pragmatically, "but you need to be whole to deal with it." Emily nodded too, exhausted to argue. Sarah took the wheel, driving her daughter's Honda Civic to her simple apartment in Silver Lake. It was small, just a 1-bedroom, but it was clean and cozy, smelling of coffee and fresh flowers. Sarah made tea, whipped up a quick omelette, and practically forced Emily to eat. Then she tucked her into bed, covering her with blankets as if she were a child again. "Mom," Emily murmured as Sarah was leaving the room. "Yes, sweetheart. Do you regret it? Telling me your story, encouraging me to fight?" Sarah returned, sitting on the edge of the bed. "No, because at least you tried. At least you didn't spend your life wondering what if. What's happening now is horrible, it's unfair, it's cruel. But you didn't do anything wrong. You fell in love, you worked hard, you were professional. The fact that bad people are twisting this doesn't change the truth of what happened." But what if the truth doesn't matter? Emily whispered. What if perception is all that counts? Then you fight to change the perception, Sarah replied firmly. You don't give up, not without a fight. Emily finally fell asleep exhausted and dreamed of endless hallways, of people pointing and whispering, of her running but never able to escape. The next morning, Thursday, Emily woke up to her phone blowing up. Messages, missed calls, notifications. She looked at the screen with apprehension. There were messages from colleagues at the office, some supportive, others clearly curious, some coldly professional asking her to clarify the situation. There were calls from unknown numbers, probably more reporters. And there was a series of messages from David, all concerned, asking her to get in touch. But the message that made her sit up straight in bed was from Roger Anderson, sent at 7 in the morning. Emily, we need to talk. Please come to the office at 10 a.m. It's urgent. Sarah was already awake, making coffee. When she saw Emily's expression, she didn't ask. She simply poured a strong cup and sat down next to her daughter. The office wants to see me, Emily said, her voice flat. Probably to fire me. You don't know that. Mom, I do. They can't afford to keep an architect involved in a scandal. It tarnishes their reputation. Then you go in there with your head held high, Sarah instructed. You didn't do anything wrong. Don't act like you did. Emily took a shower, put on her best suit, black conservative professional, and styled her hair into a neat bun. If she was going to be fired, it would be with dignity. The office was unusually quiet when she arrived. People looked away. Conversations stopped as she passed. Emily kept her head high and went straight to Roger's office. He wasn't alone. The other two partners were there, sitting in leather chairs, serious expressions on their faces. Roger gestured for her to sit. Emily, he began, and there was something in his tone that she couldn't quite identify. It wasn't exactly hostility, but it wasn't friendly either. Thank you for coming. I imagine you know why we requested this meeting. I can guess, Emily replied, keeping her voice steady. Yesterday's article created a complicated situation for the office, Roger continued. We have calls from concerned clients, questions about our professional integrity, inquiries about how we select our architects for important projects. I was selected based on merit, Emily said firmly. We know that, one of the other partners, Frank, interjected, and your work on the Anderson project has been exceptional. But Emily, you need to understand, perception matters in this business, and now you want to fire me to save the office's reputation, Emily concluded. I understand. Rest assured I won't sue or make a scene. I'll leave quietly. No, Roger said, and there was something strange in his voice. We're not going to fire you. Emily blinked, confused. You're not? No, because that would be admitting we did something wrong by hiring you, that there's some truth to the accusations. Roger leaned forward. But Emily, we need you to do something. The Anderson client is insisting that you stay on the project. He made it very clear that if you are removed, he will cancel the entire contract. Emily's heart raced. David was fighting for her, even knowing the cost. But there are conditions, Roger continued, and finally Emily saw what was in his eyes. It wasn't support, it was opportunism. You will finish the project, but afterward you will resign, voluntarily. You will say it was your choice, that you want to pursue other paths, and in exchange you will receive an impeccable letter of recommendation, and we will keep your name clean. You want me to lie, Emily said slowly. We want you to do what's best for everyone, Frank corrected. The project is successfully completed. You leave with your reputation intact, and the office maintains its credibility. And what if I refuse? Then we'll have to re-evaluate your position here, Roger said with false sympathy, and without a recommendation letter, it will be hard to find work anywhere else after this scandal. It was blackmail, plain and simple. Emily looked at the three men, all older, all in positions of power, all deciding her future as if she were a chess piece. "I need to think," she finally said. "You have until tomorrow," Roger replied. "But Emily, I really suggest you accept. It's the best way out for you." Emily left the room with shaky legs. She made it to the restroom before vomiting, her stomach churning with anger and humiliation. When she finally managed to compose herself, she washed her face with cold water and looked at her reflection in the mirror. The woman staring back had deep, dark circles, pale lips, but there was something in her eyes that hadn't been there before. It wasn't defeat, it was fury. She grabbed her phone, and for the first time, in 2 days, called David. He answered on the first ring. "Emily, thank God. Are you okay? Where are you?" "I'm at the office," she said, her voice strangely calm. "David, we need to talk. In person. Can you meet me in an hour?" "Sure. Where?" "At that cafe near Central Park, the one with outdoor seating." "Emily, with the paparazzi—" "I don't care anymore," she interrupted him. "If we're going to be crucified anyway, let it be while doing things the right way. 1 hour. I'll see you there." She hung up before he could respond, grabbed her bag, and left the office without looking back. People stared, whispered, but Emily found she didn't care anymore. She was tired of hiding, tired of being ashamed of feelings that weren't shameful. The cafe was moderately busy when Emily arrived. With that typical mid-morning rush of a Thursday, she chose an outdoor table, clearly visible, and ordered a double espresso. She needed caffeine for what she was about to do. David arrived 15 minutes later, visibly worried. He was wearing jeans and a grey sweater, and there were dark circles under his eyes that mirrored hers. He sat down and immediately reached across the table, holding her hand. "Emily, I'm so sorry for all of this. I should have been more careful, should have foreseen that someone could—" "It wasn't your fault," Emily interrupted. "And it wasn't mine. It was the fault of malicious people who decided to destroy something beautiful because they can't stand to see others happy." David squeezed her hand. "I hired investigators. I'm going to find out who leaked those photos, who gave the information." "I know who it was," Emily said calmly, "or at least I have a strong idea. Roger never wanted me on this. A project. And today he made it clear the price of my staying." She recounted the meeting, the ultimatum. David grew progressively tenser, his jaw tightening. "Then I'll cancel the project," he said when she finished. "I'll cancel everything, pull my money from that office and hire you independently." "No," Emily said firmly, "because that would only prove their point, that I need you to succeed. David, I need to do this on my own. I need to finish this project, prove that it's exceptional, and then walk away with my head held high. Not as a victim, not being rescued, but as a competent professional who did brilliant work." "And then?" "Then," Emily took a deep breath, "I opened my own office, small, modest, but mine. And I build my reputation brick by brick, project by project, the right way." David studied her for a long moment. "This is going to be hard, brutally hard, especially with all this negative publicity." "I know, but David, I can't live my life afraid of what people will think. I can't hide my feelings. I can't pretend that you and Noah aren't important to me, just because it makes some people uncomfortable." She squeezed his hand. "I'm going to fight, not in the way they expect, hiding and apologizing, but fighting with my head held high, proving my worth, and not being ashamed of who I am or who I love." The last words slipped out before she could censor them, but she didn't take them back, because they were true. David was very quiet. Then a slow smile, the one that made his dimple appear, spread across his face. "Do you love me?" he asked softly. "Yes," Emily admitted, and it was liberating to finally say it out loud. I love you. And I love Noah, and I'm not going to hide that anymore just because malicious people want to twist something beautiful into something dirty. David stood up, walked around the table, and pulled Emily to her feet. There, in the middle of the cafe, with dozens of people watching, he kissed her. It was soft but firm, a promise and a declaration. When they pulled apart, there were people taking pictures with their phones, whispering. But Emily didn't care. For the first time in days, she felt free. I love you too, David murmured against her hair. And we'll face this together, not you alone, not me saving you, together as equal partners. Together, Emily agreed. They sat down again and spent the next hour planning. Emily would finish the project, documenting everything meticulously. David would provide seed capital for her to open her own office when she was ready. They would be transparent about their relationship, not giving ammunition for more gossip through secrecy. It was a risky, bold plan. But for the first time, Emily felt like she was fighting, not running. What they didn't know was that in a parked car across the street, Laura Smith was, watching through binoculars and smiling. She took several photos of the kiss, the embrace, the evident intimacy, and as she typed a message to a number saved only as LS New York, she could hardly contain her satisfaction. The bait had been cast. Now it was time to bring in the big fish. In New York, Isabella Johnson looked at the recently received photos of her ex-husband kissing that nobody, and she smiled coldly as she booked a flight to Los Angeles. It was time to remind everyone, especially that arrogant architect, what her place was, and that some worlds should never mix. The storm was just beginning. The July chill settled over Los Angeles with an unusual intensity. Mornings dawned shrouded in fog, and the thermometer rarely climbed above 50 degrees. It was the kind of damp cold that penetrated the bones, making people huddle inside jackets and seek the warmth of coffee and fireplaces. Emily was in her apartment in Silver Lake, surrounded by piles of papers and her open laptop, when the email arrived. It was from an international architecture organization based in New York, the same one that organized one of the most prestigious conferences in the field. She opened it with curiosity, not expecting anything beyond perhaps some sophisticated spam, but when she read the first lines, her heart raced. Dear Ms. Taylor, it is with great pleasure that we invite you to present your work at the International Sustainable Architecture Conference, which will be held in New York from August 15th to November 15th. Your project for Anderson Construction caught our attention through specialized publications, and we believe that your innovative approach to corporate biophilia would be of great interest to our international audience. Emily read the email 3 times, unable to believe it. It was the opportunity any architect dreamed of, presenting at an international conference, networking with the biggest names in the field, potentially opening doors for projects abroad. But it also meant 3 months away from the US, 3 months away from David, 3 months away from Noah, who was finally starting to overcome his nightmares and feel safe again. She was still processing when the doorbell rang. It was Sarah, carrying 2 shopping bags and a warm smile. I brought lunch, her mother announced, entering and heading straight for the kitchen. Have you been eating lately or surviving on coffee and anxiety? A bit of both, Emily admitted, closing her laptop. The smell of roasted chicken and vegetables began to fill the small apartment. As Sarah set the table, Emily told her about the invitation. Her mother stopped what she was doing, hands suspended in the air holding plates. New York, she repeated slowly, for 3 months. It's an incredible opportunity, Mum. The kind of thing that could really establish my reputation internationally, give me credibility that no one could question. But Sarah knew her too well not to notice the hesitation. But David, Noah, the project here is still not completely finished, and Emily paused, struggling to articulate the conflict tearing her apart inside. And I finally have something, you know. Something real, something that makes me happy. And now I have to choose between my career and my heart? Sarah finished serving lunch, sitting across from her daughter. They ate in silence for a few minutes, the only sound being the clinking of cutlery. "Can I tell you something else about that man?" Sarah finally said, referring to Emily's biological father without naming him. "When I found out I was pregnant, a part of me wanted to tell him. I wanted to believe he would do the right thing, that he would fight for us. But then I realized something." "What?" "That if I had told him, if he had done the right thing and married me out of obligation, I would have spent the rest of my life wondering if he stayed for love or for duty, if I was a choice or an obligation." Sarah looked directly into her daughter's eyes. "Emily, you need to accept this opportunity. Not despite David, but for yourself, because if you refuse, if it for him, you will always wonder what if, and eventually you will resent him for it. But what if I go and he realizes it's easier without me, that his life works better without all the drama I've been carrying? Then he wasn't the right man," Sarah said simply. "Honey, true love doesn't disappear because you are 3 months away. It doesn't evaporate because difficulties arise. If what you have is real, it will survive the distance. And if it doesn't survive, then it wasn't solid enough to begin with." Emily knew her mother was right, but that didn't make the decision any easier. That night, Emily drove to the Anderson mansion in Beverly Hills. It was the first time she had been back since the scandal, almost a month ago. James greeted her with his usual warm smile, no judgment, no invasive questions, just kindness. David was waiting for her in the living room, not on the balcony where everything had started. He stood up when she entered, and there was something in his eyes, concern, hope, maybe fear. "Emily." He approached her but hesitated before touching her, as if unsure if he had permission. She resolved that by closing the distance and hugging him, he wrapped her in his arms, and for a moment they just stood there, absorbing the comfort of each other's presence. "I received an invitation," Emily said against his chest, "to New York, 3 months, international conference." She felt David stiffen, but when she pulled away to look at his face, there was only pride there, and maybe a touch of sadness. "It's amazing, Emily. It's exactly the kind of recognition you deserve. But it means being away 3 whole months. David guided her to the sofa, sitting beside her, their hands intertwined. "And you are thinking of refusing?" "I'm considering it." "Don't do that," David said firmly. "Emily, look at me." She did. "You can't put your life, your career, on pause for me, not after everything you fought to build. But Noah will understand. He will miss you, yes. I will miss you in a way that will probably kill me, but we're going to survive 3 months, and you—" He gently touched her face. "You will return with your reputation not only restored, but elevated to an international level. No one will ever be able to say, 'You don't deserve to be where you are.' How can you be so understanding?" Emily asked, tears threatening to fall. "Because I made that mistake once," David admitted, "with Isabella. When she got that modeling contract in Milan early in our marriage, I asked her to decline. I said it wasn't appropriate for a mother to be away for so long, that Noah needed her. She turned down the opportunity." He paused, the pain evident. "And she resented me for it. Every day I saw a little more bitterness growing in her. It was the beginning of the end of our marriage. So no, Emily, I won't ask you to stay. I will ask you to go, to conquer the world, and to come back to me when you're ready." Emily was openly crying now. "I love you. You know that, right?" "I know. And that's why I'm letting you go." David pulled her in for a kiss, long and deep, filled with promises and temporary goodbyes. When they parted, both had tears in their eyes. 3 months will go by quickly." "They won't," Emily said, but smiled through her tears. "But I will think of you every day, and of Noah, and of the future we will build together when I return." "Emily!" An enthusiastic shout came from the stairs. Noah came running down, practically jumping into her. He had grown, Emily realized. He was taller, his face losing some of its childhood roundness. "Dad said you were coming today. You have to see my new science project. It's about solar energy, and I use the principles you taught me about sustainability." Emily hugged the boy, inhaling the scent of baby shampoo and that pure energy that only children have. "I would love to see it. But Noah, I need to tell you something." They sat together, and Emily explained about New York, about the conference, about the 3 months. She watched Noah's face go through various emotions, initial excitement, then confusion, then sadness. "But 3 months is a long time," he said, his voice small. "You're going to forget about me." "Never," Emily said vehemently, kneeling to be at his level. "Noah, I could never forget you. You are one of the most important people in my life. But this is something I need to do. It's like when you have an important project at school, you need to do it well, right?" "I guess," Noah said reluctantly. "And look," Emily pulled out her phone, "we'll do video calls every week. You can show me your projects, tell me about school, and when I come back, I'll bring gifts from New York. And I promise I will never leave again for so long." Noah considered this. Then, with the surprising adaptability of children, he nodded. "Okay, but you have to promise to call me every week, no exceptions." "I promise," Emily said, sealing it with a hug. She spent the rest of the evening there, having dinner with David and Noah, helping with homework, reading stories before bed. It was painfully domestic, painfully perfect, and it made the departure even harder. When Noah finally fell asleep, Emily and David stayed on the balcony, the same one where everything had begun. The stars shone above, and the scent of jasmine still perfumed the air, even in the winter chill. "When do you leave?" David asked, his arms around her. "In 2 weeks. I need to finalize some project details here, make the transition, and then I will go." "And when do you come back?" "Mid-November. Just in time for Noah's birthday in December." David turned her to face him, his hands framing her face. "Emily Taylor, when you come back, I will be here, waiting, with Noah by my side, and we will be ready to start the next chapter of our story, together, truly, without hiding, without excuses." "Are you sure?" Emily asked, vulnerability creeping into her voice. "Are you sure you want this? All the judgments, all the difficulties?" "Absolutely," David replied without hesitation. "Because you are worth all of this, and so much more." They kissed again, and Emily tried to memorize everything. His warmth, his scent, his taste, the feeling of being in his arms, because it would have to last for 3 long months. The following 2 weeks passed in a blur. Emily worked frantically to finalize all the details of the Anderson project, documenting every decision, every specification, ensuring that construction could proceed smoothly in her absence. She trained her temporary replacement, a junior architect named Patricia, who, unlike some in the office, treated her with genuine respect. Roger kept his distance, but Emily could feel his eyes on her, calculating, planning. She didn't care anymore. In less than a week, she would be on another continent, building something that no one could take away from her. Her mother helped her pack, folding clothes with the meticulous care she applied to everything in life. "Do you have your motion sickness pills, passport, hotel confirmation?" Sarah checked for the 3rd time. "Mum, I'm 28. I've traveled alone before." "Not for 3 months, not this far." Sarah paused, looking at her daughter with shining eyes. "I'm sorry. I'm going to miss you." Emily hugged her mother. "I will miss you too. But Mom, I need to do this for myself, to finally prove that I deserve to be in any room, in any country, on any project. I know, and I'm so proud of you." Sarah stepped back, wiping her eyes. "Your grandmother would have loved to see the woman you've become." It was rare for Sarah to mention her own mother, who had passed away when Emily was a baby. "Do you think so?" "I'm sure. She always said that education was the only thing no one could take away from you. That knowledge was real power, not money, not name. You are trying this." The night before the flight, David organized a farewell dinner, just the three of them, he, Noah, and Emily. No formalities, no headaches, just homemade pizza. A tradition now, laughter, and memories being created. Noah made Emily promise for the 100th time that she would do video calls. "And you have to send me pictures from Barcelona. Dad said there are really old and beautiful buildings there." "I'll send pictures of everything," Emily promised. "And when I come back, you and your dad can visit me someday. We can take a trip together." "Really?" Noah's eyes lit up. "Dad, can we?" David looked at Emily over his son's head, and there was a promise in his eyes. "Of course we can. When Emily comes back, we will plan many adventures together." After Noah went to bed, Emily and David stayed in the garden, wrapped in thick blankets against the July night chill. The sky was clear, rare for Los Angeles, and the stars twinkled above. "Are you scared?" David asked, his arm securely around her. "Terrified," Emily admitted. "What if I'm horrible in the presentation? What if no one is interested in my work? What if you are—" "Brilliant," David interrupted her. "What if they love your work? What if this opens doors you never imagined? Emily, you need to stop preparing for failure and start preparing for success." She turned to look at him. "How are you so calm about this?" "Because I know you. I know your talent, your dedication, your passion. You are going to rock it, and when you come back, the whole world will know what I already know, that Emily Taylor is a force of nature." Emily snuggled against him, holding on to that moment, those words, for the tough days she knew would come. "David." Thank you for letting me go, for understanding, for being you." "Thank you," he murmured against her hair, "for teaching me that it's possible to start over, that it's possible to love again, that it's possible to build something real, even when the world says it's impossible." They stayed there late, talking about the future, making plans, dreaming together. And when Emily finally went home, she took with her not only the excitement of the opportunity that awaited her, but the solid certainty that she had someone to come back to. Los Angeles International Airport was chaotic on Saturday morning. Emily arrived 3 hours before her flight, as recommended, dragging 2 large suitcases and a carry-on backpack. Sarah insisted on accompanying her, although Emily protested that it wasn't necessary. Her mother helped with check-in, checked the documents one last time, and when it was finally time for Emily to go through security, she hugged her daughter tightly. "You're going to rock it, my daughter, and when you come back we will celebrate everything you've achieved, everything you are." "I love you, Mum. Thank you for everything. I love you more. Now, go before I start crying and make a scene." Emily went through security, looking back one last time to see her mother waving, smiling through obvious tears. At the boarding gate, she turned on her phone to see one last message from David. "Fly safe, dream big, and remember, you have a family waiting here, always." And one from Noah. "Safe travels, Emily. Don't forget the pictures. Love you." Emily boarded with her heart broken and excited in equal measure. As the plane took off, Los Angeles getting smaller below, she allowed herself one last look at the city that had been both her prison and her launch pad. 3 months, 90 days to prove her worth, to build a reputation that no one could question, to become the architect she always knew she could be, And then she would return, to David, to Noah, to her mother, to her life. But what Emily didn't know as the plane crossed the Atlantic was that in Los Angeles, other forces were at play. Isabella Johnson had just landed at the airport, sun-kissed and determined, a cold smile on her perfectly painted lips. Roger Anderson was waiting for her in the arrivals hall, equally smiling. "Is she gone?" Isabella asked. "Confirmed, 3 months in Barcelona." "Perfect." Isabella adjusted her designer sunglasses. "More than enough time for me to reconcile with my ex-husband, win back my son, and make sure that when she comes back, there's no more place for her in our family." "And the custody process?" Roger asked. "My lawyers are already preparing. This time, I won't accept a no." Isabella started walking, her high heels clicking on the marble floor. David has always been weak when it comes to Noah, and with that distraction out of the way, for 3 months, it's time to remind him what really matters. Family, tradition, people of the same social standing. She didn't see Roger's satisfied smile as he followed her. For him, it was just business. Emily had become a nuisance, and Isabella was the perfect solution to remove her permanently. The storm that Emily had survived was far from over. In fact, it was just gaining strength. And when she returned in November, nothing would be as she left it. August transformed Los Angeles into a month of transitions. Winter was beginning to give way, temperatures were gradually rising, and there was an expectation in the air, that feeling that changes were coming for better or for worse. David was in his office on the 23rd floor of Anderson Construction, looking out the panoramic window without really seeing the city stretching below. His desk was covered with papers, contracts waiting for signatures, reports demanding attention. But his mind was thousands of miles away, in Barcelona, where Emily was presenting her project to a room full of international architects. He had spoken with her the night before. She was nervous, excited, beautiful through the phone screen, even with tired eyes. It had been 3 weeks since she left, and each day felt longer than the last. "Mr. Anderson?" The voice of his secretary, Sarah, came through the intercom. "Ms. Isabella Johnson is here. She says she doesn't have an appointment, but it's urgent." David felt every muscle in his body tense up. Isabella had been in Los Angeles for 2 weeks, and he had managed to avoid her until now, citing meetings, commitments with Noah, any plausible excuse. But apparently, she had grown tired of waiting. "Let her in," he said reluctantly, straightening in his chair and adjusting his tie. It was better to face this head-on. The door opened, and Isabella walked in as if she were strutting down a runway. She was 39, but looked a decade younger, thanks to privileged genetics and probably some discreet aesthetic procedures. Her blonde hair fell in perfect waves over her shoulders. She wore a beige Chanel dress that likely cost more than Sarah's monthly salary, and her ice-blue eyes were fixed on David with calculated intensity. "David." Her voice was soft, modulated, with a slight accent acquired from years living in Europe. "You look well. Better than in the photos I saw online, actually." "Isabella." David did not stand up, did not offer coffee, did not make any of the gestures of hospitality he normally would. "What do you want?" She tilted her head, a small smile touching her lips. "Straight to the point. I've always admired that about you." She sat in the chair across from his desk, uninvited, crossing her legs elegantly. "I want my son back, David. I want my family back." "You abandoned your family," David said, his voice icy. 2 years ago, you chose Paris, your career, your new rich boyfriend, who, by the way, I heard is no longer your boyfriend, over your 7-year-old son. So no, Isabella, you don't have family here anymore." "I made a mistake," Isabella said, and there were tears, probably fake, shining in her eyes. "A terrible mistake that haunts me every day. But David, I've changed. I've done therapy, worked on myself. I realize that nothing matters more than Noah. That nothing matters more than the family we built. That you destroyed, David corrected. That I destroyed, Isabella agreed softly, leaning forward, and that I want to rebuild. David, Noah needs his mother, especially now. With you, getting involved with unsuitable people. There it was. David felt the anger boiling, but he kept his voice steady. If you're referring to Emily, she is not unsuitable. She is a talented architect, an extraordinary woman, and one of the best influences Noah has ever had. She is the daughter of your housekeeper, Isabella said coldly, the mask of vulnerability slipping. David, for God's sake, do you think that's appropriate? Our son being raised by those people? What will society think? What will your partners think? I don't care what society thinks, David said, now standing planting, his hands on the table, and my partners can worry about their own relationships. Isabella, Emily has more class, more dignity, more real value in her pinky finger than you do in your entire perfect and artificial body. So if you came here expecting me to reject her to get back with you, you're going to be very disappointed. Isabella also stood up, her eyes shining with genuine anger now. I am Noah's mother. I have rights. You gave up those rights when you left. No judge would agree with that, Isabella countered. David, I didn't want to have to do this, but you leave me no choice. My attorneys have already prepared papers requesting joint custody, and if you fight this, I will seek sole custody, citing that you are exposing Noah to unsuitable situations, prioritizing scandalous romances over his well-being. David felt as if he had been punched. You wouldn't do that to him. I would do anything for my son, Isabella said, and for the first time there was something genuine in her voice. Even fight you, even destroy your reputation if necessary, because Noah deserves better than to be raised in a scandal, deserves better than to be the joke of the Los Angeles elite. Noah is happy, David said through clenched teeth. For the first time since you left, he doesn't wake up crying every night. He doesn't have nightmares. He doesn't ask where you are. And do you know why? Because Emily filled the void you left. She treats him with kindness, listens to him, values him. She is not his mother, Isabella practically shouted. Then she composed herself, smoothing her dress, taking a deep breath. When she spoke again, her voice was controlled. David, I came here hoping to resolve this civilly, but I see that you are too emotionally compromised to be rational. So let me be clear, you have two options. I'm listening. Option 1, you end this ridiculous relationship with the girl, we agree on civilized joint custody, and we rebuild a stable family structure for Noah. It doesn't have to be romantic between us, but we can be united parents, present a solid front. And option 2? Option 2, I fight for sole custody. And don't underestimate my resources, David. I have photos, testimonies from employees, evidence that you are prioritizing your relationship over Noah's needs. Evidence that you hired Emily for non-professional reasons, creating a toxic work environment in your company. I will drag this through every family court, through every gossip column, until you are painted as the selfish father who is putting his son at risk for a romantic whim. David stared at her for a long moment. There were so many things he wanted to say, so many ways he wanted to dismantle her arguments. But one thing stopped him, the realization that Isabella was serious, and that, as unfair as it was, she had resources and connections that could truly turn that threat into reality. Reality. I need time, he finally said, to think, to consult my own attorneys. You have a week, Isabella said, grabbing her designer handbag. After that, I'll file the papers. And David, don't make the mistake of underestimating my determination. I've already lost 2 years with my son. I won't lose any more. She left, leaving a trail of expensive perfume and veiled threats. David sat heavily in his chair, running his hands over his face. How had everything fallen apart so quickly? That night, Noah was doing homework in the living room when he heard the doorbell. Sarah, who was preparing dinner, went to answer it. Noah heard voices, Sarah's and another high-pitched, vaguely familiar female voice. Curious, he went to the hall and froze. A beautiful blonde woman was there, looking at him with a big smile. "Noah, my love, how you've grown." Noah took a step back, confusion evident on his face. He knew that woman. He had pictures of her in his room. But she was more of an abstract figure than a real person, someone who existed in hazy memories and blurred sense of forgotten times. "You don't remember me?" Isabella asked, and there was real pain in her voice. "I'm your mother, dear." "I know who you are," Noah said, his voice small. "You're in Paris." "Not anymore. I'm back. For you." Isabella knelt down to his level. "Noah, I'm so sorry for leaving, for being away for so long. But I'm here now, and I want to be part of your life again. Will you let me?" Noah looked at Sarah, who was clearly uncomfortable, unsure whether to intervene. Then he looked back at Isabella. "Where have you been?" he asked, and there was a pain in his voice that broke Sarah's heart. "When I was scared at night, when I got sick, when I called you and you didn't come?" Isabella blinked, tears, this time genuine, shining in her eyes. I was lost, Noah, trying to find myself. But I realized I can't find myself away from you. You are the most important person in the world to me." "Emily was here," Noah said, and there was a stubbornness in his chin that Sarah recognized as being from David. "Emily took care of me when I was sick. Emily helps me with homework. Emily makes me smile. I know about Emily," Isabella said carefully, "and I'm sure she's very nice. But dear, I am your mother. No one can replace that." "Emily isn't trying to replace anyone," Noah shot back. She's Emily, and I like her, and Dad likes her, and you left so you can't boss her around." "Noah!" Sarah finally intervened, but gently. "It's not respectful to talk like that." "But it's true," Noah insisted, turning to Sarah. "Mrs. Sarah, tell her. Emily is good. Emily makes us happy." Isabella stood up, and there was something cold in her eyes, now, despite the smile plastered on her face. "Sarah, maybe it's best for you to go prepare dinner. I need some time alone with my son." Sarah hesitated, looking at Noah. The boy nodded slightly, though he looked uncomfortable. Reluctantly, she returned to the kitchen but left the door ajar. "Noah," Isabella said, sitting on the sofa and patting the spot next to her, "come sit with me. I need to tell you some things about adults, about relationships, about what's appropriate." 2 hours later, when David got home, he found Isabella still there, sitting in the living room, with Noah. The boy looked exhausted, confused. Isabella smiled triumphantly. "David, I was just talking to our son about the importance of family, of structure, of having both a mother and a father present." David looked at Noah, who avoided his gaze. Something was wrong. "Noah, go upstairs. I'll talk to you in a bit." The boy ran off, clearly relieved to escape. David turned to Isabella. "What did you tell him?" "Just truths," Isabella replied casually. "That it's normal for children to get attached to temporary caregivers, but that it's not healthy to confuse that with real family. That adults sometimes make selfish choices that aren't good for children, things like that." David felt anger boiling. "You poisoned him against Emily." "I opened his eyes to reality," Isabella corrected. "David, how long until she gets tired of playing family? How long until a better opportunity comes up in another country, with another man who has more money, another ladder to climb? And then what? Noah gets attached, gets hurt when she inevitably leaves." "Emily isn't like that." You barely know her." Isabella stood up, confronting him. 6 months, David? You're betting our son's emotional well-being on a 6-month relationship with someone you barely know. "I know her enough," David said. But there was a seed of doubt planted now, not about Emily, but about the timing, about whether he was being fair to Noah, about whether he was prioritizing his own heart over his son's stability. "Think about it," Isabella said, softening her tone. "I'm not asking you to be unhappy. I'm asking you to put Noah first. Let Emily pursue her international career. If after some time, when Noah is more stable, when I'm more present, you still want to explore her, well, we can discuss it. But right now our son needs stability, not more changes." She grabbed her handbag. "Think about my proposal. A week, David. And in the meantime, I'd like to start spending more time with Noah, picking him up from school, dinners, weekends. I need to rebuild our bond." After she left, David went upstairs to Noah's room. The boy was in his bed, hugging a teddy bear that Emily had given him. "Hey, champ." David sat on the edge of the bed. "Want to tell me what she said?" Noah remained quiet for a moment. A long moment. Then, in a very small voice, "She said that Emily is leaving, that everyone leaves eventually, except for real family." David felt as if someone had squeezed his heart. "Noah, is it true, Dad? Emily is leaving and won't come back, like Mom did?" "No," David said firmly, pulling his son into a hug. "Emily will come back. She promised. And unlike other people, Emily keeps her promises." "But what if Mom is right?" Noah whispered. "What if I like her too much and she leaves me?" David had no answer for that, because how could he guarantee, how could he promise anything about the future, about feelings, about Emily's permanence in their lives when he himself was being forced to question everything? "Emily loves you," he finally said. "I know that, and she wouldn't hurt you on purpose." "But Mom loved me too," Noah said, his childlike logic devastatingly simple. "And she left me anyway." David stayed with Noah until he fell asleep, humming softly, brushing hair from the boy's forehead. And when he finally came down, he found Sarah in the kitchen preparing tea. "I heard," she said bluntly. "Isabella is a snake, she always has been. But a clever snake." "What do I do, Sarah?" David asked, accepting the cup of tea. "How do I protect Noah from being hurt again, but without giving up on Emily?" Sarah studied him for a long moment. "Can I ask you a question, David? Do you love my daughter?" "Yes," he answered without hesitation. "And do you trust her?" "With my life." "Then trust her with Noah's heart too," Sarah said simply. "Because if you start to doubt, if you start to pull back, Emily will feel it, and she will think she has to choose between her career and you. And Mr. David, a woman forced to make that choice, will resent you for the rest of her life, no matter what she chooses." "But Isabella is right about one thing," David admitted. "Noah needs stability. And with Emily away for 3 months, with Isabella coming back, with all this chaos, Noah needs love," Sarah corrected him. "Consistency, yes. But more importantly, he needs adults in his life who love him unconditionally and who are honest with him. David, don't lie to the boy. Don't make promises you can't keep. But also don't push away the people who truly care because you're afraid they might leave." David nodded, but the seed of doubt planted by Isabella continued to grow. And when he finally went to sleep, he didn't call Emily as he did every night. Not because he didn't want to, but because he didn't know what to say. How would he explain that his ex-wife was back, threatening legal action? That Noah was confused and hurt? That David was starting to wonder if he was being selfish, prioritizing his own feelings over his son's well-being? So he set the phone aside and tried to sleep, not knowing that in New York, Emily was staring at her silent phone, worry growing in her chest. David never missed a night. Something was wrong. And thousands of miles away, neither of them knew how the chasm between them was growing. carefully cultivated by the hands of people who didn't want to see them together. The storm was intensifying, and this time it might be too strong for them to survive. September arrived with that subtle change marking the arrival of spring in Los Angeles. The trees began to bloom, the days grew longer, and there was a promise of renewal in the air. But inside the Anderson mansion, the atmosphere was heavy, laden with unresolved tensions and silences that screamed louder than words. Emily was in her hotel room in New York, looking at her phone for the 10th time in an hour. It was already past 11 at night in Spain, which meant it was 7 in the evening in Los Angeles. The time when David would normally be having dinner with Noah, the time when they always managed to have a quick video call. But it had been 4 days since they last spoke, 4 days of short messages, one-word answers, excuses about meetings running late, urgent commitments. And Emily, who knew David well enough to read between the lines, sensed that something was terribly wrong. She typed another message. "David, please tell me what's going on. You're scaring me." The response took 20 minutes to arrive. "Sorry, everything's fine. Just a lot of work. You must be tired. Get some rest. We'll talk tomorrow." Everything's fine, the two most deceitful words in the human vocabulary. Emily threw her phone onto the couch and walked to the window of the rented apartment. New York sprawled below, its lights twinkling. Like earthly stars, the Empire State Building illuminated in the distance. It was a beautiful city, full of history and breathtaking architecture, and she should have been excited. Her presentation at the conference had been a resounding success. She had received 3 offers for international projects, and her name was circulating in the right circles. But none of that mattered when her heart was shattered into pieces, when she knew something was destroying what she had built with David, and she could do nothing about it thousands of miles away. The phone rang. It was her mother. Emily answered immediately. "Mom, what happened? It's late there." "I know. Sorry for calling so late." Sarah's voice sounded tired, worried. "But I needed to talk to you about what's happening here." Emily felt her stomach drop. "Tell me everything." And Sarah did, about Isabella coming back, about the custody threats, about the poisonous conversations with Noah, about how David was becoming more distant, more closed off, about how the mansion that had been filled with laughter and light in the weeks before Emily left now felt dark, tense. "And there's more." Sarah hesitated. "Roger Anderson has been showing up at the house. Private, meetings with David, conversations that stop when I walk into the room. Emily, I don't trust him, and I don't—" He sent it before he could change his mind, then hung up the phone and placed it in the drawer. He didn't want to see the response. Not now. In New York, it was almost 2 in the morning when Emily's phone vibrated. She was finally dozing off when the notification woke her up. She read the message once, then again, and then again, the words refusing to make sense. Maybe the timing just isn't right for us. He was breaking up with her. Through a message, no conversation, no chance for her to fight back, nothing. Emily felt as if the world had collapsed. She had been fighting so hard, working so much, building so much. And in a text message, everything had been destroyed. She typed a frantic response. "David, no. Please don't do this over text. Call me. Let's talk. Please." The message was delivered. Read. But there was no response. She tried to call. It went straight to voicemail. Tried again. Same thing. He had turned off his phone. Emily began to cry. Deep sobs, shaking her whole body. She had been struggling so much, working so hard, building so much, and in a text message, everything had been destroyed. She called her mother, not caring that it was almost 11 at night in Los Angeles. Sarah answered on the second ring. "Emily, what happened?" Between sobs, Emily told her. Sarah was silent for a moment afterward, and Emily could hear her heavy breathing on the phone. "That idiot!" Sarah finally said, anger evident in her voice. "That cowardly idiot! I'm sorry, I know he's your boss, but my God, Emily, he's doing exactly what I feared. He's letting himself be manipulated. What do I do, Mom? Do I go back? Do I leave everything and go back?" "No." Sarah's response was immediate and firm. "Because, sweetheart, if you run back now, he'll think he's right, that you're unstable, that you don't have commitment to your career, that you'll always put relationships first. Emily, you need to finish what you started here. You need to prove to yourself, more than anyone else, that you're strong enough to survive this. But what about David and Noah? Noah will be fine. He has me. He has his father. And David?" Sarah paused. "David needs to figure out on his own that he's making the biggest mistake of his life. And when he realizes it, you need to decide if you still want him after being discarded so easily." The words were harsh but necessary. Emily cried a little more, letting the pain flow, and then gradually something else began to grow inside her. Not anger exactly, but determination, resolution. "You're right," she finally said, her voice still choked but stronger. "I'm not going to give up what I've built here. I'm not going to prove their point that I'm unstable, emotional, unprofessional. I'm going to finish what I started, and then—" she took a deep breath. "Then I'll decide if David Anderson deserves a second chance with me." "That's it," Sarah said approvingly. "That's my daughter, strong, independent. You don't need any man to validate your worth, Emily, not even him." After hanging up, Emily washed her face, made herself some tea, and forced herself to go back to bed. Tomorrow, she would have a meeting with potential clients from London, and she was going to crush that meeting. She was going to show them, show David, show Isabella, show the whole world that Emily Taylor was more than the maid's daughter. She was a talented architect, a competent professional, a woman who wouldn't let herself be broken by cowardly men. But as she tried to sleep, she couldn't stop thinking about Noah, the boy who had become so important to her, who trusted her, who loved her, and who would now wake up one day and find out that Emily had left too, just like his mother. That hurt more than David's betrayal, because Noah was innocent, and he was going to get hurt because of cowardly adult decisions. The next morning, as David made coffee, trying to maintain a semblance of normalcy for Noah, there was a persistent knock at the door. He opened it to find his own mother there, Mrs. Johnson, a 70-year-old woman with an upright posture and piercing gaze. "Mum, what are you doing here so early?" "I came to talk some sense into my son before he makes the biggest mistake of his life," Mrs. Johnson said bluntly, entering uninvited. She waved to Sarah, who was in the kitchen. "Sarah, dear, could you make me a coffee, please? And then you should join this conversation because it involves you too." David closed the door, confused. "What are you talking about?" Mrs. Johnson sat down in the living room, waiting until Sarah brought the coffee, and sat down as well. Then she looked at her son with an expression he hadn't seen since he was 17 and had done something particularly stupid. "Isabella called me yesterday, all proud, saying that you had finally seen the light and broken up with the inappropriate girl, that you were going to rebuild a proper family for Noah." Mrs. Johnson took a sip of coffee, and I thought, "My son can't be that stupid. But then Sarah called me early this morning, told me what you did, and I realized that yes, apparently you can." "Mom, the situation is complicated." "Complicated," Mrs. Johnson repeated with disdain. "David, your father, God rest his soul, and I didn't agree on much, but one thing he always said was, 'Helena, never let the fear of judgment from others stop you from loving.' And that's exactly what you're doing." "It's not about fear," David protested. "It's about Noah, about protecting him from more pain." "Are you protecting him?" Mrs. Johnson leaned forward. "Or are You using him as an excuse for your own cowardice? David, Noah is happy with Emily. For the first time since Isabella left, that boy is genuinely happy. And you're taking that away from him for what? Because your ex-wife, who abandoned you both. Let me remind you, are you manipulating him with legal threats? She is his mother. She abandoned him, Sarah almost shouted, for 2 years. And now she comes back wanting to play the role of a devoted mother? David, you're not stupid. You know Isabella didn't come back for Noah. She came back because she saw you. Happy, saw that you were moving on, and her ego couldn't handle it. Sarah had been quiet until now, but finally spoke up. Mr. David, can I say something? Of course, Sarah. My daughter loves you. She loves Noah. I see it every time she talks about you too, every video call, every email. And yes, she's far away now, but she's far away building something important, something that will benefit not just her, but you both as well. Because a strong relationship is made of 2 strong individuals, not one person sacrificing everything for the other. But what if she doesn't come back? David finally voiced his deepest fear. What if she realizes there's a whole world of opportunities out there and staying here, with me, with all these complications, isn't worth it? Then she was never the right one, Sarah said simply. But David, you can't make that decision for her. You can't push her away preemptively because you're afraid of being left. She searched for the word. That's pathetic. The words hit like a slap. David looked at the 2 women, his mother and Sarah, and saw concern, love, but also disappointment in their eyes. I thought I was protecting him, David said, his voice breaking. You're teaching him, Sarah said gently, that when things get tough, you give up. That when you're scared, you push away the people you love. That love isn't something worth fighting for. Is that what you want Noah to learn? David ran his hands over his face, exhausted. What do I do now? I already sent that terrible message. I've already pushed her away. You call her, Sarah said, as if it were obvious. You humbly admit that you were a cowardly idiot. You beg for forgiveness, and you fight for the relationship, and if she decides that you don't deserve a second chance after being so cruel, well, you'll have to live with the consequences. David grabbed the phone he had left in the drawer. He had 17 missed messages from Emily, each progressively more desperate, then more angry, then nothing. The last 3 messages were short. I understand. You need to do what's best for Noah. I'll finish my work here, as planned. Take good care of him. Take good care of yourself. There was no anger, no pleas, just acceptance. Somehow, that was worse. David started to dial, then paused. What time is it in New York? 10 in the morning, Sarah said. She must be in a meeting now. But David, don't let another day go by. Don't let her think you've given up on her. David nodded, already thinking about what to say, how to start fixing the mess he had made. But what none of them knew was that in New York, Emily was in a meeting that would change everything. A London architecture firm was offering not just a project, but a permanent position. Good salary, housing included, growth opportunities she would never have in Los Angeles. And for the first time, she was seriously considering accepting, because maybe Isabella and David were right. Maybe she didn't belong in that world, in that life. Maybe it was time to build something new, far from Los Angeles, far from the memories, far from the broken heart. The choice was in her hands now, and for the first time she wasn't sure what she was going to decide. October brought to Los Angeles that rising heat announcing the coming summer. The jacarandas exploded in purple flowers along the avenues, turning the city into a sea of color. But inside, the Anderson mansion, the atmosphere remained gray, heavy with the weight of regrets and missed opportunities. David was sitting in his office, staring at the phone that wasn't ringing. It had been 3 weeks since that conversation with his mother and Sarah, 3 weeks since he tried to call Emily for the first time, 3 weeks of unanswered calls, messages left in the void, emails that received polite but distant responses. "I'm fine. Work is going great. I hope Noah is happy. Take care." Nothing more. No emotion, no openings, no door left ajar. And David couldn't blame her. He had been cruel, cowardly, had ended things over a message and then disappeared. Why should she give him another chance? A knock on the door pulled him from his thoughts. It was Patricia, the architect who had temporarily taken over Emily's project. "Mr. Anderson, there are some final decisions that need your approval before we proceed with the final phase of construction." David gestured for her to come in, forcing himself to focus on work. The project was almost complete, and even in Emily's absence, it was turning out spectacularly. Every detail reflected her vision, her passion, her brilliance. "The vertical garden in the atrium is installed," Patricia showed photos on the tablet, "and the solar panels on the terrace are operational. The energy savings are already exceeding initial projections by 15%. David looked at the images, feeling a mix of pride and melancholy. Emily had created something extraordinary, and he had destroyed it. "It's perfect," he said. "Stick to the schedule. I want it completely ready by mid-November." "For when Emily comes back?" Patricia asked, then immediately seemed to regret the indiscretion. "Sorry, it's none of my business." "No," David interrupted her tiredly. "You're right. It was supposed to be ready when she returned. If she returns—" Patricia hesitated, then spoke carefully. "For what it's worth, Mr. Anderson, Emily is one of the most talented architects I've ever met. And in the conversations we've had about the project, she always mentions you and Noah with such affection. Whatever happened between you two, I'm sure it can be fixed if you both want it." "The problem, David," he bitterly said, "I just don't know if she wants to anymore." That night, David picked up Noah from school. The boy had become quiet again, introspective, painfully reminding David of how he was right after Isabella left. He got into the car in silence, threw his backpack in the back seat, and stared out the window without saying a word. "How was school today?" David tried, driving towards home. "Normal." "Do you have homework?" "A little." "Noah, look at me." David stopped at a red light and turned to his son. "Are you okay?" Noah finally looked at him, and there was something in the boy's eyes that broke David's heart. It wasn't anger, it wasn't sadness, it was disappointment. "You lied," Noah simply said. "About what?" "You said Emily was different, that she wouldn't leave like Mom, but she did." "Noah, it wasn't like that." "Yes, it was." The boy's voice rose, years of bottled emotions finally overflowing. "She was going to come back, she promised, but you made her really leave just like you made Mom leave." David felt as if he had been punched. "Noah, I didn't make your mother." "Yes, you did. I heard her yelling at you before she went to New York. She said you were never home, that you loved work more than us, that she couldn't stand being invisible anymore." Tears were now streaming down Noah's face. "And now you did the same thing to Emily. You made her feel like she wasn't important, like we didn't need her." The light turned green. Horns blared behind them. David drove mechanically, Noah's words echoing in his head. How had he been so blind, so selfish? He had repeated the same mistake, pushing away the people he loved because he was afraid of not being good enough for them. "You're right," David finally said, his voice thick. "I messed everything up with your mother, with Emily, and you're paying the price for my mistakes." Noah wiped his face with the back of his hand. "I just wanted you to fight for her, Dad, like in the movies, like you said you would." "I tried," David admitted. "I called, I texted, but Noah, I hurt her so much. And maybe she decided it's better without us." "Then try harder," Noah insisted with the simple logic of childhood. "You always tell me not to give up when something is hard. So why are you giving up on her?" David had no answer, or rather he did, but he was too cowardly to admit it, because it was easier to give up than to face the possibility of rejection, of hearing Emily say that he didn't deserve another chance. When they got home, Sarah was waiting for them with dinner ready, but there was something different in her expression, a tension that David recognized immediately. "Sarah, what happened?" "Emily called today," Sarah said, her voice carefully neutral. "She wanted to talk to me about some decisions she's making." David's heart raced. "What kind of decisions?" Sarah looked at Noah, then back at David. "Maybe we should talk after dinner." "No," Noah said firmly. "I want to know. It's about Emily. I want to know." Sarah sighed, sitting down at the table. She received an offer from a firm in New York, permanent position, housing included, excellent salary. They're giving her a week to decide. The world stopped. David felt as if the ground had been pulled from under his feet. "And is she going to accept?" "She's seriously considering it," Sarah admitted. "She said there's nothing keeping her in Los Angeles, that her career here is tainted by the scandal, that the opportunities there are infinitely better, that maybe it's time for a fresh start." "But what about us?" Noah asked, his voice small and broken. "She doesn't care about us anymore." Sarah looked at the boy with compassion. "She cares a lot, Noah. But sometimes, when people hurt us too much, we need to protect ourselves. We need to choose our own happiness." "When does she need to decide?" David asked, his mind already racing. "By the end of the week, Friday." David looked at the calendar on the wall. Today was Monday. He had 4 days. 4 days to fix months of mistakes, to prove to Emily that she had a place here, that she was loved, that it was worth fighting for. "I need to go there," he suddenly said. "I need to go to New York, talk to her in person." "David," Sarah said carefully, "are you sure? What if she doesn't want to see you? What if you go there and she says it's really over?" "Then at least I'll know I tried," David replied, "that I fought, that I didn't give up on her without giving it my all." He looked at Noah. "You were right, champ. I need to fight for her, like in the movies." Noah's eyes lit up with hope for the first time in weeks. "Are you going to bring her back?" "I'll try," David promised. "I don't know if I'll succeed. She has every right to reject me after what I did, but I will try." That same night, David was booking a flight to New York when his phone rang. It was Roger Anderson. He considered not answering, but something made him take the call. "David, we need to talk, in person. It's about Emily Taylor and some revelations that have come to light." Half an hour later, Roger was sitting in the living room of the mansion, a thick folder in hand. His expression was strangely satisfied. "I received this today," he said, sliding the folder across the coffee table, "from a reliable source in New York." David opened the folder, confused. Inside were photos of Emily, at meetings, at business dinners, always impeccably professional. And with her in several images was a tall, blonde, attractive man, always smiling at her with obvious admiration. "Who is this?" David asked, a bad feeling growing in his stomach. "James Crawford," Roger replied. "Senior partner, the London firm that offered the position to Emily. They have been seen together frequently in recent weeks. Dinners, social events, always very close." David studied the photos. In all of them, Emily looked happy, relaxed, laughing. There was nothing obviously romantic, but there was an intimacy in their body language that he couldn't ignore. "Why are you showing me this?" David asked, although he already knew the answer. "Because you deserve to know the truth," Roger said with false concern. "David, you are a good man. And Emily, she is ambitious, She always has been. Do you think it's a coincidence that she is receiving these incredible offers, that she is suddenly being courted by international firms? She is doing exactly what she has always done, using connections, playing her charms, climbing the ladder. "Get out," David said, his voice dangerously low. "Excuse me." "Get out of my house, now." David stood up, grabbing the folder and throwing it back at Roger. "I know exactly what you're doing. You and Isabella. You have been working together from the start, planting doubts, manipulating situations, doing everything you can to destroy my relationship with Emily, and I was foolish enough to let it work." Roger also stood up, his mask of concern falling away. "You are making a mistake. The only mistake I made," David interrupted him, "was trusting you. It was letting your poison and Isabella's infect my mind, my heart. Emily earned everything she has on her own merit. She is 10 times the professional you are, 100 times the person. And if she is being courted by international firms, it's because she is exceptional, not because she is using charms." "David, be realistic. Realistic. Let me tell you what is realistic, Roger. Realistically, you are fired. Realistically, I will review every contract you have worked on in the last 5 years because I now question your integrity. And realistically, if you don't get out of my house in the next 10 seconds, I will throw you out myself." Roger looked at him for a long moment, seeing that there was no negotiation, no manipulation that would work. He grabbed his folder and headed for the door. "You will regret this," he said. "The only thing I regret," David replied, "is not having done this sooner." After Roger left, David stood in the living room, trembling with anger and adrenaline. Sarah appeared from the kitchen, where she had obviously heard everything. "You did the right thing," she said. "I should have done it weeks ago." David ran his hands through his hair. "Sarah, tell me something. Honestly, do you think Emily might have taken an interest in someone else? This James Crawford?" Sarah considered the question carefully. "I know my daughter, David, and when she loves completely. Could she be networking, being professional, making important connections? Absolutely. She would be foolish not to. But using charms or starting romantic relationships, no, that is not who she is. But what if she met someone who didn't hurt her, who didn't reject her? Then you go there," Sarah said firmly, "and remind her why she fell in love with you in the first place. You fight, David, because my daughter deserves someone who fights for her. And if you are not that someone, then she is truly better off without you." David nodded, determination growing. "I will. Tomorrow morning, first flight. But Sarah and Noah, with Isabella threatening a lawsuit, leave Isabella to me," a voice said from the door. It was Mrs. Johnson, who had arrived unnoticed. "I will deal with my ex-daughter-in-law, and I will take care of Noah while you are away. But David, you need to go, now, before it's too late." The next morning, David was at LAX, small suitcase in hand, ticket to New York in his pocket. Noah had woken up early to say goodbye, hugging his father tightly. "Bring her back, Dad," he had whispered. "Please." "I will try, champ. I promise I will try." The flight was endless. 11 hours of David rehearsing what he would say, how he would start, how he would ask for forgiveness. He arrived in New York at 7 in the morning, local time, after a sleepless night on the plane. Sarah had given him the address of Emily's temporary apartment. David took a taxi straight from the airport, arriving shortly after 8. It was a modern building in Manhattan, all glass and clean lines. Typical of Emily to choose something like that. He climbed to the 4th floor, found number 4B, and knocked before he could lose his courage. Footsteps on the other side. The door opened, and there was Emily. Wet hair from the shower, no makeup, wearing jeans and a simple white top. She froze upon seeing him, her honey-colored eyes widening in shock. "David." Her voice was an incredulous whisper. "What? How did you—" "Emily." Her name came out like a prayer, a plea. "Please. I know I have no right to be here. I know I hurt you terribly, but I need to talk to you. I need to fight for us, even if it's too late. Even if you've already decided, I need to try." Emily stared at him for a long moment, too many emotions crossing her face for David to decipher. Then slowly, she opened the door, wider. "Come in," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "You came a long way. You deserve to be heard." David stepped into the small but cozy apartment. There were plants in the windows, architectural sketches scattered on the table, a steaming cup of coffee still on the counter. Signs of Emily's life, her routine, a world she had built without him. They sat on the sofa, a careful space between them. Emily folded her hands in her lap, waiting. "I was an idiot," David began, the words he had rehearsed evaporating. "A cowardly idiot who let fear and manipulation destroy the most precious thing I ever had. Emily, when I broke up with you over text, when I pushed you away, I thought I was protecting Noah. But I was just protecting myself, protecting my heart from possible rejection." "David, please let me finish," he pleaded. "Isabella came back and started planting doubts about us, about the timing, about you eventually leaving me. And I let it happen. I let those doubts grow. I let fear win. And in the process, I made exactly the mistake I swore I would never make. I pushed away someone I loved because I was afraid I wasn't good enough." Emily remained silent, but tears sparkled in her eyes. "I know about the offer in London," David continued. "And Emily, if that's what you want, if it's what's best for you, I won't try to stop you. You deserve the whole world. You deserve every opportunity, every success. But I needed to come here and tell you that you also have a place in Los Angeles, with me, with Noah, that we love you, that I love you. And if you give me a second chance, I swear I'll fight for you. Every day. I won't let fear or social pressure or other people's opinions push you away from me again." "You destroyed me," Emily finally said, her voice breaking. "David, when I received that message, when I realized you were discarding me so easily, something broke inside me, and I don't know if it can be fixed." "I know," David said, tears streaming down his own face now. "And if it can't be fixed, if I hurt you too much, I'll have to live with that. But Emily, please, give me a chance to try, to prove that I'm better than that moment of cowardice, that the man you knew, who had coffee with you that January morning, who fell in love with you, that man still exists, and he's here, begging for another chance." Emily wiped her tears, but more kept falling. "I received the offer from London. And David, it's incredible. It's everything I've ever dreamed of professionally. But? David barely dared to breathe. But when I think about accepting, all I can see is Noah's face. The promise I made to him to be back for his birthday. The video calls we still have every week, where he tells me about school, about projects, about how much he misses me." She looked directly at David. "And you, even after everything, even after how you hurt me, when I think about never seeing you again, it hurts. It hurts too much. Emily." "But I can't just go back and pretend nothing happened," she continued firmly. "I can't be the woman who gives up everything for a man, even a man I love. David, I've built something here. I've made connections, proven my worth, created a reputation, and I can't throw all of that away. I'm not asking you to throw it away," David said quickly. "Emily, I don't want you to choose between me and your career. I want to be the man who supports your career, who celebrates your successes, who encourages you to soar. If you want to take international jobs, we'll make it work. If you want to open your own office in Los Angeles, I support you. If you want to do both, we'll figure it out. The point is, I want to be by your side, not in your way." Emily studied him for a long moment. "Michael Thompson. Have you heard of him?" The name hit David like a punch, but he nodded. "I've heard. He's one of the partners at the London firm. He courted me professionally, showed me around the city, introduced me to important clients. And yes, he made it clear he's interested in more than professionalism." Emily paused. "He's handsome, successful, kind, no complications with ex-wives or custody battles. It would be easy with him." David felt like he was dying inside, but he forced himself to stay quiet, letting her finish. "But I don't love him," Emily said simply. "I don't love him. I love you. I love the coward idiot who came to New York to beg for a second chance. I love the man who has coffee with me in the mornings, who defends my honor in meetings, who is an amazing father even when he's terrified of getting it wrong. I love you, David, and I hate that I love you because you hurt me so much, but the heart doesn't care about logic, apparently." David couldn't hold back any longer. He closed the distance between them and kissed her, pouring months of longing, regret, and love into that kiss. Emily resisted for half a second, then melted against him, returning the kiss with equal intensity. When they pulled apart, both were crying and laughing simultaneously. "I'm going to decline London," Emily said. "Not for you, not completely, but because my place is in Los Angeles, with you, with Noah, with my mother, and yes, building my career there my way." "Are you sure?" David asked. "Emily, I don't want you to regret—" "I'm sure," she interrupted him. "But David, there are conditions. Couples therapy, for both of us to learn to communicate better, for you to learn not to run away when you get scared, and clear boundaries with Isabella. I won't go back to a situation where she's constantly manipulating us." "I agree with everything," David said without hesitation. "And Emily, I've already dealt with Roger. I fired him, and I'll deal with Isabella too, with the right attorneys, with firm boundaries. Noah deserves to have his mother in his life, but not in the way she's trying to force." Emily nodded, then smiled, that smile that David had missed so much. "When are you going back to Los Angeles?" "My flight is tomorrow morning, but Emily, will you come with me?" She looked around the apartment, at the sketches on the table, at the life she had started to build. Then she looked back at David. "Give me 2 days to sort things out here. I need to decline the offer in person. I need to finish some projects. I need to pack. But then, yes, I'll come back with you. Home." David pulled her into another embrace, and for the first time in months, he felt true hope. It wouldn't be easy. They still had a lot to rebuild, a lot of trust to restore. But they were together, and this time, he wasn't going to let her go. Outside, New York shone under the October sun, beautiful and vibrant. But for David and Emily, entwined on the sofa of that small apartment, the whole world had been reduced to this moment, this second chance, this promise of a fresh start. The worst was behind them. Now, it was time to build something new, something solid, something that could withstand any storm, together.